Timeless Assassin. Author. Raj_Shah_7152. Chapter 604 to 625. Chapter 604. An interesting conversation. Dream World, Leo's POV. The timeless assassin studied Leo intently, his gray eyes calm yet piercing, as though sifting through long-buried memories while searching for a trace of familiarity in the boy's face that refused to surface. His black hair fell neatly to his shoulders, streaked faintly with silver at the temples, indicating that he was a middle-aged man who, although within his prime, still had a few gray hairs of wisdom. Overall, there was a gentleness to his features that made him seem more like a kind father than the universe-feared killer his legend proclaimed him to be, and instead of the instinctive fear Leo expected to feel upon meeting him, what stirred within him was a quiet, almost unsettling calm. Your eyes and ears, they carry my father's shape, and I can feel my blood flowing in your veins. Who are you, child? Are you one of my own? The voice struck Leo harder than the words, for its depth and tone reminded him of Jacob. Not in accent, but in pitch, in timbre, in the way every syllable carried weight, sounding steady and mature. It was like listening to a ghost of home, and the familiarity made Leo's chest tighten. Push. Leo rose to his feet, brushing the dust from his clothes, before extending his hand forward, in a steady and respectful manner. I'm Leo Skyshard, sir. A descendant of yours, he introduced, as the timeless assassin's expression broke into a smile that warmed his whole face, softening the sharpness of his gaze. He clasped Leo's hand firmly, shaking it with surprising warmth. Oh, a descendant. That explains why you look like my father. Ha ha ha. His booming laughter filled the dreamscape as he placed his hands on his hips with exaggerated cheer, a gesture so carefree it made Leo's left eye twitch in disbelief. This man before him looked more like a doting uncle than the peerless assassin whose name had once shaken empires. But tell me, son, how did you come across this vial? I left them only for Caliph and Soren. I trust my children are faring well. He asked, as Leo scratched awkwardly at the back of his neck, his voice lower than usual. Well, sir, it was your son Soren who gave me the vial. He told me that if you asked about him, I should not say much, because he wants to tell you the story of his life himself. Preferably on the last day of it. The timeless assassin's smile softened further, pride glimmering in his gray eyes as he chuckled deeply. That sounds exactly like Soren. Ha 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 ha. I am proud of that boy. But then his expression grew curious, his voice thoughtful. I created these vials a few days after I attained godhood, so I don't know what happens in the future or how my life ends. But I left a will entrusting these vials to a confidant, who is supposed to give them to my children after my death. Assuming Soren already has his vial, and is saving it for the last day of his life. May I ask why he gave Caliph's vial to you? The timeless assassin asked, as Leo's gaze dropped, pity shading his features. Well, I was not there that day, so I do not know every detail. But around 2200 years ago, the records say you were betrayed by Caliph, and that was how you died. So, Soren felt Caliph no longer deserved his vial, and he entrusted it to me. The words left Leo hesitant, as though he had ripped open an old wound. Yet the timeless assassin's face showed no shock, no anger, only a steady acceptance. As instead of outrage, a faint smile curved on his lips. So that is the thread of fate that finally unraveled, If Caliph's hand ended my life, then it was always meant to be. I saw the possibility of it when he was still just a boy. And if I could not stop it even with all my foresight, then perhaps I was never the father I thought myself to be. He said without any bitterness or resentment, as he only expressed a quiet melancholy that made Leo's heart ache. Here was a man speaking of betrayal by his own blood, yet instead of fury, there was only a weary acceptance of what was written in destiny. I am sorry for your loss, sir, Leo said softly as the timeless assassin waved him off with a small gesture, his steps unhurried as he began walking through the shifting dreamscape, while gesturing for Leo to follow. What is lost, child. I am already dead, and grief holds no power here. Come, walk with me. Tell me how the cult fares, how the other gods behave, and whether mortals live in peace or continue in suffering. I know Soren must have sent you here for a reason. And I'm sure that he wants me to give you something before our time here ends. Which I will. But indulge me for 8 minutes first, tell me what has become of the universe I left behind, and then I will spend the last 10 minutes of our conversation teaching you something that you truly need. The timeless assassin offered, as Leo nodded readily, falling into step beside him, as he told him about the current state of the cult's affairs. Well, sir, the cult of ascension is still a force in the universe. So at least it exists, and that's good. Your son, Soren, he's a powerful god now and he leads it. But apart from that there's nothing good to say. The people are happy, but their pride is wounded, for the cult is no longer what it used to be. Legends say that at the end of your life, you controlled close to 85% of the rainbow stream, while the current cult only holds 5% of that land, which comes out to be a handful of planets. The remaining cult members are fiercely loyal, but they yearn to regain the lost pride and territory, which is what they're obsessed with. But progress is slow and the ones who betrayed you are too powerful to push back. It's a mess, sir, but Soren is trying his best, and although the progress of regaining lost pride is slow, I think the worst is behind us and that the cult is on the rise once more. Leo shared, as the timeless assassin winced slightly at that piece of news. That's not exactly how I envisioned the cult to be 2,200 years after my passing. I thought, by that time it would become a paradise for its people, but I guess I was wrong. If I could go back in time, perhaps I'd focus more on making the cult more self-reliant instead of me micromanaging everything, but I can't change what happened. So I'll try to advise you instead, son, hoping that you fulfill the dream that I could not. The timeless assassin said, as he took in a deep breath and looked towards the sky with a soft, regretful smile on his face. Let me tell you a small story, son. This was a lesson I intended to pass on to Soren or Calith. But back then I was too stubborn about how I wanted to be as a father, so I never shared my weaknesses with them. In hindsight, maybe I should have. Maybe I need not be so hard on them all the time. But hey, I guess I got the karma for my bad parenting. So I'll try make up for it now, he said, as he placed a gentle hand on Leo's shoulder and let out a deep sigh. Chapter 605, Invaluable Life Advice. Dream World, Leo's POV. You have my blood, so I'm assuming you're not that different from me. But feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. The timeless assassin began, as he squeezed Leo's shoulders just a tad bit tighter while looking towards the shifting clouds of the dream world with a soft smile. We are warriors who are driven by an obsessive compulsion to grow stronger. I don't know why, but in my whole life, I've only ever felt most peaceful when I'm in the heat of battle and my thoughts are singularly focused towards survival, as only in that moment do I feel the most alive. The timeless assassin shared, as Leo nodded in understanding. This was exactly how he felt too. At first, I never understood why I had this drive to become stronger. Or why I chased godhood so relentlessly. But it was only after I became a god that I realized why. He said, as he took a slow, deliberate pause. We chase strength, because that's the only way the thrill continues. You know what's the most pitiful ending for a man? The most pitiful ending for a man is when he's no longer in his prime. When things he could do easily in his sleep become a daily challenge. When new upstarts start showing him that he's old and finished in his own line of work. That's when a man starts to die. And it happens long before he actually comes near his deathbed. The timeless assassin shared, his voice filled with certainty. You're young, but by now you understand the frailty of mortal life. And you understand that if you don't grow stronger, this body of yours will age and eventually die. And then, you will no longer be able to chase that thrill of the battle, because you won't have it in you to fight. You might not know it yet. But the only reason you chase immortality is because deep down, you want yourself to keep feeling that thrill over and over again. You want to give yourself the opportunity to feel alive. And the only way you can guarantee it, is if your body remains in its peak condition, and obeys your every command. The timeless assassin shared, as Leo listened carefully to his words of wisdom, absorbing everything he said like a sponge. However, let me tell you son, while the battles are what make you feel alive, they're not your whole life. Your whole life are the people around you. The ones who give meaning to your existence. As without them, you're nothing. The timeless assassin shared, as he glanced towards Leo, his gaze kind and insightful. Imagine if you're surrounded by nobody but grandmasters that are equally as powerful and talented as you. Will you feel special then? Will you feel powerful then? Will chasing power have any meaning for you then? If everyone around you always remained at the same level of power as you? He asked, as Leo shook his head in denial. Power was a means to an end, a tool. And if chasing more power achieved nothing of substance, then it was useless. Exactly, every living human chases wealth, power, status, because it differentiates them from the others. Because it gives them individuality in a crowd. Because it gives meaning to their life. But it's only meaningful, because others can't obtain it. So in the end, what I'm trying to say is, you, me, everyone, we are not really chasing power for the sake of becoming powerful. We are chasing a vision. A legacy. Something that makes us feel that, Leo Skyshard, was alive, and here is how his life changed the universe around him. He said, as he paused and let out a big smile. As a child, you make birthday cards for your mother, or do your best to make her smile. Because as a child, that acknowledgement, that joy of your mother is what makes you feel happy, and your life meaningful. But as you grow up and meet more people, it's wealth, status, and power that gives you that same feeling. As being the most envied man in the room, is a powerful feeling that everyone wants. However, let me warn you child. What you're chasing is something very shallow. And by the time you realize that by putting countless hours in getting stronger, you're losing countless hours you should have spent with people that matter, it will be too late. In the blink of an eye, everyone you ever loved or cared for will be dead. And by the time you stand at the pinnacle of power, having finally achieved immortality, the people you really wanted to be proud of you, will no longer be around you to cherish it. The timeless assassin said, as Leo felt his own heart clench at those words. His mother and father were mere mortals, while Luke, Amanda and Amelia were only going to be around for 100 to 150 years more unless they managed to ascend to transcendent, which was highly unlikely. In the grand scheme of time, if he really lived for thousands and thousands of years like Soren did, then the later parts of his life were bound to be extremely lonely. I was strict with how I raised Kalith and Soren, because for me, my boys were my forever. The two individuals who I would help reach godhood, so that I could be proud of them, and they could be proud of me for an eternity. But somewhere along that path, I made a mistake, which is evident in how I got killed. So, looking back at my life, if I have one advice for you, it's, cherish the people around you more. You're going to miss them a lot someday, so try making the most of your time with them while you still have it, so that you don't grow up to be a lonely old man like me. Finally, people come and go, but ideas are forever. The cult of ascension is not an organization, but an idea. An idea where gods, instead of using their power to oppress those under them, use it to improve their short lives instead. As unlike them, who will live forever, the mortals they govern over will die in the blink of an eye. So as overlords, it's their duty to make those short lives as beautiful as possible. And that's all I want for the cult. It doesn't matter how small or big it gets, as long as my people are happy. The timeless assassin shared, as with that he concluded his life advice and began cracking his neck. Alright, that's it for the old man's life talk. Ha 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 ha. Thank you for listening, son. Now for the next 10 minutes, it's my turn to give back to you. Tell me, how can I help you? What exactly is it that you want me to guide you on? You can ask me for anything, and I won't say no. The timeless assassin offered, as Leo bowed before him deeply. The life advice he had offered today was already extremely valuable for Leo, as it guided him on how to not become a bitter old man filled with regrets. However, since he still had the opportunity to learn some more, he decided not to waste a single second of it. Although there are many things I want to learn from you, sir, if there's one thing I want to see first, it's the pinnacle of your power. I've heard legends about it. So for once, I want to see it with my own eyes. I want to see what the pinnacle of the assassin path truly looks like. He requested, as the timeless assassin's eyes beamed at the request. This bonus chapter is sponsored by patron Sunnybunny via Supergift. Please thank him in the comments for the same. Chapter 606, Incomprehensible Power. Dream World, Leo's POV. So, you want to see the peak of my powers, eh? The timeless assassin asked as he rubbed his chin with a faint chuckle, his gray eyes narrowing with a mixture of amusement and patience. I'll show it to you, but I don't think you will be able to comprehend what I reveal just yet. Only when you step into the realm of a monarch and start learning about the laws governing the universe will you be able to understand the true extent of what I showed you today. He warned, as with a snap of his fingers, he summoned an apple in his hand, its skin a flawless red that shimmered faintly under the shifting dreamlight. Without any delay, he then bent over and placed it gently on the soft grass at their feet, as he pointed towards it with a gentle smile. This is a real apple, child, he explained, so that Leo would not misunderstand him later. It is not an illusion, nor a projection, nor a trick of your eyes. Its weight, its scent, its taste, all of it is real. So tell me, do you believe you can pick it up if you try? Leo crouched slowly, his eyes narrowing as he studied the fruit with more caution than he would a blade aimed at his throat. He allowed absolute vision to check the apple's shape, tracing its curves, confirming the way its shadow stretched across the grass, the way the faint sweet aroma tickled his senses, that it was indeed real. Yeah, I can grab it, he said with confidence. At least I should be able to, unless you actively block me. The timeless assassin raised his hands in an innocent gesture, his smile widening faintly. Go ahead then, I will not block you. He encouraged as Leo leaned forward, his hand stretching out carefully, as he tried to grab the apple. But then, an impossibility struck. Though he could see the apple as clearly as the lines of his own palm, though he could smell its sweetness growing sharper as his body drew closer, though its shadow still touched the blades of grass between his fingers, his skin met nothing. His hand closed around nothing but plain air. The apple remained in sight, perfect and solid before him, yet somehow it was untouchable. Leo froze, stunned. His brow furrowed as he pulled back, staring harder and activating absolute vision to its limit. The fruit glowed with undeniable reality, every detail mapped by his senses. He could see it, he could smell it, he could believe in it. But he could not touch it. What? He muttered under his breath, as his instinct screamed that this was not an illusion but something deeper, something utterly beyond him. The timeless assassin chuckled softly, his expression calm, as if watching a child struggling to understand the shape of the sky. Try again, son. Take it, if you can. He said, as Leo's jaw clenched as he reached once more, faster this time, his hand shooting out like a striking snake. For a fraction of a second his palm seemed to graze its surface, the dreamlight bending around his touch. Yet again it slipped through, the apple vanishing the moment he made contact, only to reappear whole a breath later in the same spot, untouched, as though mocking him. Frustration simmered inside him as his left eye twitched. It's there, he whispered. It's real. I can feel the air shift around it, I can see its shape, so why can't I grab it? The timeless assassin lowered himself to a squat beside the fruit, his fingers brushing the stem casually as if to remind Leo that it was real, just as he had said, as he smiled and explained. Because it no longer belongs to your present. Grab. After saying those words, he picked up the apple with ease, turning it over in his hand before tossing it lightly in the air and catching it again, each movement deliberate, each angle cruelly simple. I destroyed its past, child. The moment before you touch it, it ceases to exist. The instant after you touch it, it ceases to exist. What remains is only the fragment of the moment you think you see, an apple suspended in now, but absent from every thread of before and after. That is why you cannot take it. You are reaching from a line of time that no longer holds it. Leo's lips parted, but no words came out. His heart thudded heavily in his chest as he realized that this was not a matter of speed or illusion, but of law itself. It was not a trick of sight, but a refusal of time. The timeless assassin held the apple up to Leo's face, then crushed it slowly in his fist. Except it did not break. Juice did not run. Instead, the fruit dissolved like sand pouring through his fingers, crumbling into fragments of nothing that vanished before they reached the ground. This is the peak of my art. To decide what is permitted to exist across the stream of time, and what is not. He stood again, dusting his palms, his gaze steady and kind as if he had not just shattered Leo's understanding of reality. You see the apple. You believe in the apple. Yet you will never hold the apple, because I have cut it out of the places where your hands belong. Leo's fists clenched unconsciously, his pulse pounding in his ears as he whispered, "This power, it's not something anyone can fight." The timeless assassin tilted his head and smiled faintly. That is the point, child. No one can fight what does not exist for them. A battle against me is not a contest of strength, nor of speed, nor of perception. It is a battle against inevitability. And inevitability does not lose. Leo felt his throat dry as he realized what kind of man stood before him. It was not the sharpness of his blade, nor the swiftness of his step, that had earned him the title of timeless assassin. It was this incomprehensible mastery over the river of time, this ability to edit the very script of existence that did. Even though he could not comprehend it, the sheer feeling of it left him stunned. For the first time in a long while, Leo felt truly powerless, like he still had a long way to go, before he could even glimpse at what the pinnacle of power truly looked like. Tap. The timeless assassin placed a hand gently on his shoulder, the warmth of his palm grounding him. Do not be disheartened. You will not understand this power now. You are not meant to. But the day you step beyond the realm of monarch, and the threads of time begin to bend faintly under your will, you will remember this moment, and then you will finally understand what I showed you today. He stepped back, the air around him bending faintly as though the world itself made space for his presence. Until then, focus on building a solid foundation, and always try fighting opponents that are a tier above your current strength. For if you can take them on, those at the same realm will never bother you. He advised, as Leo lowered his gaze, excitement running through his veins, as he realized that maybe someday, at the end of his journey, he too could achieve a mastery over time akin to the timeless assassin. Chapter 607, Final Bits of Advice. Dream World, Leo's POV. 5 more minutes to go, boy, the timeless assassin said, his gray eyes narrowing as his smile softened with both finality and weight. You can ask me one more question, so make it count. He said, as Leo's throat tightened, but he wasted no time. I'm about to ascend to the transcendent tier soon. According to you, what should I focus on once I get there? Leo asked, as the timeless assassin rubbed his chin in thought, his expression far more serious now than at any point during their talk, as though considering not just what to say, but also what not to say. As after a long silence, he finally nodded. At the transcendent tier you are no longer a mere mortal, yet you are not truly on your way to becoming a god either. It is the bridge tier, the foundation upon which monarchs and demigods are built, and while you may feel tempted to race ahead, you must remember that a weak foundation dooms the structure above it. He leaned closer, his voice steady as stone. So, I would say focus at the transcendent tier. You should focus on 3 main things. He raised one finger. First, push your physical and mental limits to their absolute peak. Most warriors rush their promotion, believing speed of ascension equals strength, but the truth is that those who hollow themselves out along the way, often crumble when the weight of higher realms falls upon them. At Transcendent, I would say you should test yourself. Strain every circuit, every nerve, every thread of your soul until it sings with pain and growth. If you wish to stand at the pinnacle, you cannot afford to leave any part of yourself unsharpened. He said, before raising a second finger. Second, seek versatility over flash. Learn skills that grant you function, adaptability, and unpredictability in battle, and avoid the temptation of techniques that only serve one narrow purpose, for at the higher tiers, such skills fulfill no real purpose. Beyond the monarch tier, all battles will be fought not with named techniques, but with laws themselves. Laws of flame, laws of gravity, laws of time. Moves will lose their meaning. The only skills that will matter are those that mold seamlessly into your style, amplifying your natural rhythm rather than boxing you into a rigid script. So when building your foundation, only learn skills that complement you and give you more versatility and not moves that you have to actively set up to use during battle. Finally, he raised a third finger, his expression softening, his words carrying the weight of a gift rather than simple advice. And third, the most important. When you wake, go to Soren. Ask him for the meditation manual called the Emperor's Suppression Manual. Pursue it as your core, since you have already mastered the basic stages of aura. With this, you will not only sense the aura that surrounds others, but will also gain the ability to manipulate it. If mastered, you will be able to crush the hearts of armies without lifting your blade and silence the courage of monarchs before they can even swing. Learning it will be difficult, unbearably so, but that is the difference between an average warrior and an exceptional one: control. If you can master aura, you can dictate the flow of battle before it begins, so at the transcendent stage, I'd say that's the ideal outcome. Leo's heart raced, every word etched into him like scripture, as he committed it all to memory. You're a talented boy. You remind me of my sons, Kalith and Soren, when they were still young and brimming with hunger. He said before reaching out, as he ruffled Leo's hair as though he were no more than a mischievous child. If I were still alive, I would take you under my wing and shape you myself. But I am not, so instead, I leave you these fragments of my wisdom in hopes that you will treasure them, and use it to avoid some pitfalls on your road to become the strongest. The dreamscape around them began to shiver as the timeless assassin said those words, their time together unfortunately coming to an end. When you wake up, the timeless assassin's voice lingered like an echo, soft yet resounding in Leo's bones. Tell Soren, tell my boy that his father is proud of him, and that I am waiting for the day he tells me the story of his life with his own lips. He said, as the dream crumbled entirely, the green fields and the blue skies dissolving into a rush of white, as Leo's eyes snapped open once more inside Soren's treasure room. What happened? Did he talk to you? Charles asked eagerly, as soon as he woke up, as though ready to shake the answer out of him if Leo delayed the response for even a heartbeat. Sigh. Leo let out a long, steady exhale, his chest rising and falling as though the dream still lingered in his lungs, before finally giving a small nod. Yeah, he admitted quietly, his tone carrying both awe and exhaustion. He did talk to me. He taught me some invaluable lessons, things I'll carry with me forever. And right before he sent me away, he also gave me a message for Soren. He turned, his gaze settling on the god before him, his eyes steady, his voice firm as he repeated the final words. He said, tell Soren that his father is proud of him, and that he's waiting for the day you tell him the story of your life yourself. The words seemed to echo in the treasure room, as Soren froze where he stood, his frail fingers trembling around the edge of his robe, his pale lips parting but no sound escaping. Charles's eyes widened, darting between Leo and Soren, the hardened commander suddenly stripped of his composure, as silence fell, heavy, reverent, and unbroken. For the first time in centuries, Soren lowered his head, a faint shiver passing through him as though the weight of 2,000 years had just grown both lighter and heavier for him at once. Chapter 608, an important revelation. Planet Ixtal, Soren's castle, the treasure room, Leo's POV. It took Soren some time to steady himself, his trembling hands finally pulling back into his sleeves as he gathered his thoughts and steadied his composure. What advice did my father give you for your future? Tell me everything, he demanded, as Leo recounted it all carefully, not embellishing nor withholding, until at last he reached the part about the Emperor's Suppression Manual. So he wants me to hand you the Emperor's Suppression Manual, Soren muttered, his brows knitting as his voice dropped into a tone of disbelief. That is odd. Very odd indeed. He found it almost laughable, the thought that his father wished for him to entrust a manual that Soren himself had only managed to master at the demigod stage, to a boy who had not even crossed fully into transcendent. Are you certain that is what he said? Soren pressed again, his sharp gray eyes boring into Leo. But Leo only shrugged lightly in response, his expression plain but resolute, as he nodded. He had never even heard the name of the manual before this day, yet if the timeless assassin himself had declared it his path forward, then there was no room for doubt. Sigh. A long breath escaped Soren, his head shaking slowly from side to side, until finally he gave a weary smile of acceptance. Well, I suppose it is not impossible. You did master the sevenfold revelation codex at the Grand Master stage, when aura mastery is something most fail to grasp until Monarch. So if you could achieve that, then perhaps you might be able to grasp this as well. But like my father warned, it will be brutally difficult. Of that, I have no doubt. The weight of his words sent an involuntary shiver down Leo's spine. Memories of the codex surfaced at once, the endless walking along the streets, the suffocating frustration of not breaking through for months, the desperate measures he needed to take to finally force breakthroughs. He already despised the torment of that path, and yet he had endured, barely clawing his way to mastery through sheer stubbornness, and the absurd luck of surviving long enough to put what he learned to use. Even so, when he counted both the years within the time-stilled world and the 1 year that had passed since, it had taken him 4+ years to tame that one beast of a method. Fuck me, Leo thought, as his lips pressed into a thin line. Yeah, to be honest, I don't want to walk into another method that feels impossible to master. I hated the codex enough. But I guess there are no shortcuts to becoming a god. If I want to be the best, I have to work for it. No excuses. His tone was not loud, but it carried a steady conviction that resonated through the chamber, as Charles's chest swelled faintly with pride at the boy's words. Leo was reckless, impatient, and too quick to deal death when provoked, yet when it came to the path of strength, he never once wavered, never once backed down from the pain that others would flee from. And that, more than anything, was why Charles believed he was destined to climb. All right, if you know the challenges but are ready to face them anyways, then I have no reservations about giving it to you, just wait here a moment. Soren said, as he began looking around in his treasure room, until he spotted the manual collecting dust on a bookshelf. Poof! Blowing the dust off, Soren carried over the manual to Leo and placed it in his hand with a soft smile. You'll be the first individual to master this method after my brother and me in case you do manage to master it. It's written by my father. And it's one of the methods he was very proud of. Soren said, as he entrusted the legacy over to Leo now. I'll try my best to master it. Leo said before placing it in his storage ring, as Charles tapped gently on his shoulder and gestured for him to start moving out of the treasure room. Nodding, Leo began making his way out, when Soren reminded him that he still needed to deliver the origin medal to him soon. Bring the metal slab to me soon. Either hand it over to Charles, or come to me directly with it. I never thought that I'd go for an adventure at this stage of my life, with me barely having 2-3 centuries worth of life left in me, that too if I don't overexert. However, the temptation to refine a new origin blade and use it to exact revenge is too sweet to pass on. I've waited 2200 years for this chance. And now that it's finally here, I can't risk missing it. Soren reminded, as Leo nodded in understanding. He needed to first retrieve the medal from Chaosbringer, before handing it over to Charles, but that wouldn't take too long. He could arrange for Chaosbringer to visit Juxta soon, and the handover could then take place. Step. As the trio began walking back up the winding steps, Soren let out a long sigh and informed them about a new development in the universe that the two of them were surely not aware about until now. The Sioux clan god, Su Ren is dead. He was killed by Calith a couple days ago. And soon the bloodshed to carve apart the Sioux family empire shall begin. It will be the perfect opportunity for me to slip out of the cult territory unnoticed. As I doubt that the Righteous Alliance will make any big moves for a few months now. Soren said, as both Leo and Charles paused mid-step, their eyes wide with shock at the casual piece of news that Soren just dropped. The Sioux family god is dead. Charles repeated, as if he couldn't believe how Soren withheld such important information for so long. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Chapter 609, Panic Inside the Sioux Clan. The Sioux family god is dead. Charles asked, his voice heavy with disbelief, as Soren simply nodded, his expression indifferent. Yeah, I think they made an example out of him. An example of what the cost is to defy the universal government. The 6 great clans wanted independence from the Righteous Alliance at this year's All Gods Summit, but they didn't get it. Instead, Sioux Ren died, and now the Sioux family lands will be gobbled up by the other hungry wolves. It's a tragedy. But Sioux Ren had it coming. Soren explained, as both Leo and Charles turned eerily quiet. This was quite a big development with major universal implications. However, no public news had been leaked yet, meaning not many people knew about the Sioux family god's death. You're going on an expedition to capture Planet Nemo, yeah. Should be easier now that the Sioux clan will be in internal turmoil. Play your hand right and you'll secure a nice piece of land for yourself. Soren said to Leo, as Leo nodded absent-mindedly. He had no particular affection for the Sioux clan as a whole, and hence he did not care what happened to them. However, he did care for Su Yong, and wondered if he would be okay through all this mess. Lord Soren, if you were the remaining 5 clans, would you allow a direct Sioux family descendant to live? Leo asked, as Soren clicked his tongue in refusal. Click. No chance. Not just the main clan. I wouldn't let anyone carrying the Sioux name survive, for they'll only cause more problems down the line. He said, as his reply was all the confirmation Leo needed to realize that his friend might be in deep trouble. Meanwhile, inside the Sioux family war room. The atmosphere within the Sioux family war room was solemn, as all Sioux family warriors holding the rank of a monarch, or the distinction of a commander, were called for an emergency meeting at the capital. At the head of the table stood Su Tang, the Sioux family patriarch, his silk robes disheveled and clinging to him with sweat as though even his clothing had turned against him, while his trembling hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His eyes darted between the assembled veterans of his clan, his voice caught between duty and dread, as before him sat the past, present and future of the clan. Some of them were his uncles and aunts, gray-haired monarchs who had once guided him when he was a child barely able to circulate mana. Others were cousins and their children who had grown into their prime, their eyes sharp and unyielding as they represented the next generation of leaders. These were not ordinary warriors, each of them was a pillar of the Sioux name, a symbol of the clan's enduring might, veterans who had fought wars on countless planets and carved the Sioux legacy into the stars. Yet tonight, all eyes bore into Su Tang, searching not just for words but for reassurance, for answers, for a glimmer of hope that the foundations of their clan were not about to collapse. Finally, Su Tang drew in a breath, steadying himself before speaking. His voice wavered, but the silence was so complete that every syllable seemed to echo against the stone walls. Father left for the All Gods Summit 2 days ago, he began, his words heavy with strain, and he has not returned since. Murmurs broke out immediately, though he raised his hand to silence them, forcing himself to continue. Although we cannot confirm what might have happened, our spies embedded within the other clans report something troubling. They say that he might have been betrayed, and killed. And that the other great clans may already be preparing to carve apart our lands. The words fell like thunder across the chamber. For a long heartbeat, there was only stunned silence, eyes darting between one another as though seeking some denial that refused to come. The very notion that Su Ren, the god of their clan, the pillar who had carried them for centuries, could be dead was not something that could be absorbed in a single moment. He cannot be dead, an elderly aunt spoke, her voice sharp with disbelief. Do you hear yourself, Tang? Your father is a god. The Sioux family god. Who among the Righteous Alliance would dare kill him? Who among them could? Another slammed his palm on the table, sparks of mana lashing from his hand as his eyes burned with fury. This reeks of conspiracy. Betrayal. The 6 clans have long envied our lands. If Su Ren truly fell, then it was not in a fair fight but in some coward's ambush. The room erupted in overlapping voices, disbelief mutating into outrage as old monarchs roared their indignation. Some cursed the other clans, vowing vengeance even before the facts were fully known. While others accused the universal government of orchestrating the downfall, pointing at the timing of the summit, their suspicions fueled by centuries of mistrust. Su Tang raised his voice, straining to be heard above the chaos, but the storm of outrage raged on. For them, Su Ren was not just a father, or a leader. He was a symbol of immortality, a shield that had always stood between them and annihilation. To accept his death was to accept that the Su name was vulnerable, that the universe would no longer bend around their banner. Yet as the minutes dragged on, the outrage waned, replaced by something far colder. Nervousness. The room grew quiet again, though now the silence felt heavier, more suffocating than before. Eyes darted across the table, no longer filled with denial or rage, but with the slow realization of what this meant. The 5 great clans were now united against them. Each only comparable in strength to the Su clan by themselves, but together, an unstoppable tide. It was then that Su Bao, the commander of Planet Nemo, who was seated midway down the table, finally broke the silence. His tone was steady, but the weight of his question pressed down on everyone present. If the news is true, he said, his words calm but his eyes burning with quiet fire, and if the other clans come for us all at once, what is our course of action? We cannot pretend this storm will pass us by. If they are intent on eradicating the Su name, then they will not stop until every last one of us is buried. His question lingered in the air like a blade pressed to every throat. Su Tang swallowed, his eyes shifting to meet his nephew's, then scanning across the grim faces of his clan's pillars. We need to strategize, he said at last, his voice hoarse, to decide which planets we will protect, and how much territory we can realistically hold onto. We cannot delude ourselves into thinking we can hold everything. Not against 5 enemies. If we try to clutch it all in our hands. He paused, his lips tightening as though the words themselves were poison. Then we might lose everything. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence was different, laced with unbearable dread. The veterans of the Su clan, the strongest and most loyal of their blood, looked at one another with the sinking realization that history itself had turned against them. For the first time in 2 millennia, the proud warriors of the Su family felt the shadow of extinction settling across their shoulders. And the fear that their days of universal dominance were finally coming to an end. Chapter 610. Desperate Measures. The War Room, Su Tang's POV. Once everyone had accepted the fact that Su Ren might be dead, the following conversation about which territories to protect and which to abandon, became the biggest family quarrel that the Su family had ever experienced. Abandon 70% of our territory. An older commander growled, his fists pounding the table as sparks of mana flared from his knuckles. Do you hear what you're saying, Tang? My branch has held Kalen for 1200 years. Every stone of that planet was built by Su hands, every river paved with Su blood. I will not abandon it. You think Kalen is more important than Shiro? Another commander cut in sharply, her crimson robes flaring as her aura bristled. My family's bones rest on that planet. If the Su clan must retreat, then others can give ground first. Shiro stays in our hands. The room erupted in overlapping voices, each commander fighting for their branch's planet, each unwilling to let go of what they had cultivated for centuries. Some invoked the names and contributions of their ancestors, others invoked strategic value, while many simply refused out of wounded pride. They will slaughter us all if we stretch our forces too thin. They're not coming for me or you in particular, they're coming for the Su name as a whole. Su Tang interjected, his voice raised, though it was nearly drowned by the storm of protests. We cannot defend every world. Not against 5 clans at once. To cling on to everything is to invite destruction. He warned, but pride deafened the ears of his clansmen. How could they easily give up what they had held for so many centuries? As by now, they did not believe their status as rulers to be a privilege, but rather a birthright. My men would rather die standing on Tenlung soil than cower on someone else's, one of his uncles declared, his eyes blazing. And what of your civilians? Su Bao shot back, his voice breaking through the uproar. Will you let them be butchered alongside your pride? Will you allow every man, woman, and child who swore loyalty to us to be ground into ash because you cannot let go of land?" He said, as his comments silenced the crowd for a breath, though the anger still boiled beneath the surface. "Let's be realistic here. We have a few weeks, maybe a month, but not more than that. The 5 great clans should have started preparing for the logistics of war by now, and they will make their move soon. So, we have very few days left to strip our lands with every valuable asset we can carry, and extract every irreplaceable talent that we can take with us to safety. This is not the time to squabble internally. I'll be the first to say, I'm ready to abandon Planet Nemo if it's in the best interests of the clan. And I suggest that the rest of you do the same," Su Bal said, as he tried to sound reasonable. However, unfortunately for him, reason did not soothe wounded pride. Once his speech finished, arguments flared up once again, with commanders demanding which planets would be chosen, voices rising in outrage at the thought of their home planets being the first to be sacrificed. Fingers were pointed, accusations flew, and soon the war room filled itself with the sound of Su bloodline tearing itself apart in the face of extinction. Su Tang felt the weight of leadership pressing down on him like an avalanche. His father's absence, the betrayal of the clans, the survival of his people, all of it rested on his shoulders. And he did not know what to do for certain. Bam! Enough! His voice thundered across the chamber, his palms slamming down on the table as the force of his aura rippled outward, silencing the room. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with the authority of the patriarch. "We do not have the strength to argue. Every moment wasted here is another moment the wolves prepare to tear at our borders. You all want to protect your homes, I understand, but if we cling to pride we will lose everything. We will evacuate what we can, we will strip the outlying planets of assets and lives, and we will consolidate around Su Prime, Vera, Kotal, and Mitrava. Those 4 worlds we will defend to the last breath. The rest, we abandon." Murmurs rose again, but none dared challenge him outright. His decision was a death sentence for dozens of branch family-controlled planets, yet it was the only path that ensured the survival of the Su clan as a whole. Su Tang's hands trembled beneath the table where no one could see, but his voice remained steady. "If you cannot accept my decision, then leave this chamber. But if you remain, then you will obey my commands. From this moment on, we are no longer separate families with separate armies. We are all the Su clan, and the universe is our enemy." The chamber fell silent once more, the veterans exchanging uneasy looks, their pride bleeding into reluctant acceptance. They all knew the truth. The Su clan would not survive if they tried to hold everything. Yet giving up what they so lovingly built was easier said than done. If you have sent your scions to other planets for education or training, call them back. They are no longer safe if they remain in enemy territory. And work your hardest to weed out every known spy or mole that can relay the internal news about the clan to the enemy. We don't break the news about the Su clan god dying to the masses till the very last day. Because, mass hysteria will only ruin every step we make. From now onwards, we are on our own, and are no longer a part of the righteous alliance," Su Tang said at the end, as with that he concluded the emergency family meeting. Chapter 611, Sneak Attack. Planet Wu Tang, Su Yang's POV. After graduating from the Rodova Military Academy, Su Yang enlisted with the Regal Mercenaries Guild, a group regarded as one of the strongest in recent years, their prestige soaring after they absorbed much of the elite talent left adrift by the collapse of the Black Serpents Guild. For him, it was never meant to be a permanent path, only a year-long trial to temper himself in the brutality of real missions, to learn how the universe truly functioned outside the walls of academies and clan halls, before returning to the clan's fold as a more seasoned adult. However, today, as he sat within the guild's mess hall surrounded by the rowdy clamor of warriors boasting of their kills and rattling their coined purses, he received an urgent message. "Yang, this is an urgent letter for you," said the male lady, handing him an envelope marked with the Su family's seal. Su Yang cracked it open with a curious smirk. "It has the family's seal, I wonder what it could be," he muttered, expecting some formal request or tedious clan duty, only for his expression to darken as he read the words inside. Su Yong, return to clan's fold immediately. The matter is urgent. Speak to no one, carry nothing, and leave at once. Be careful. Trust no one. Patriarch. Su Tang. Huh. Why has father recalled me so urgently? He whispered, his lips twitching in mild confusion, as his heart skipped a beat. Is father sick? He wondered, as he immediately rose from his seat and began casually strolling out of the guild hall. Once outside, his golden eyes glimmered faintly as he scanned his surroundings, while absolute vision expanded outward to cover every blind spot. His steps appeared relaxed, but his entire body was alert, his senses stretched taut as bowstrings, as he made his way toward the hangar bay. Step. He walked without hurry, yet fast enough to look busy. However, it wasn't long before he felt it. A faint disturbance in his blind spots, coupled with muffled sound of footsteps that weren't supposed to be there. Someone was tailing him, and although he had no idea why, since his father sent him such an ominous letter, he automatically assumed the worst and began running, as he took a sudden detour into a narrow street, in hopes of shaking his pursuers off. Tap. The echo of pursuit behind him confirmed it. There were indeed men trailing him, as he scanned their mana signatures to find out their tier. 3 warriors, all transcendents, he realized grimly, his jaw tightening as his stride broke into an all-out sprint. The air rushed past him as his cloak whipped at his heels, the cobblestone beneath his boots striking with sharp rhythm. His pursuers followed immediately, their aura leaking faintly now that they no longer cared to hide. Huff. For 20 minutes he ran, and for 20 minutes they followed, regardless of whether he weaved through alleys or markets, as despite running at his top speed, and taking several sharp turns, he still couldn't shake them off. Then, suddenly, hope appeared for him in the form of 2 patrolling local officers in iron-gray armor, as he realized that they might be able to give him some temporary respite. Officers! He screamed, before stumbling in front of them, his chest rising and falling as sweat lined his brow. Huff. May we help you, young man? One of them asked, their eyes narrowing as they glanced at Su Yong, then past him. Su Yong turned slightly, his golden gaze falling on his 3 pursuers, who had halted in uncanny synchronization, their attention suddenly fixed on a nearby wall and a merchant's display of trinkets, as they feigned the casual stance of innocent travelers. Just as he had expected, none of them dared to act with 2 transcendent patrol officers standing at his side, and hence he decided to make the most of the situation. Those men, Su Yong said coldly, pointing without hesitation, I think they were trying to rob me. Step. The 3 froze for a split second before darting off, their figures blurring as they bolted into the crowd. Hey, stop right there. One of the patrol officers roared, before instantly giving chase, their armored boots pounding against the stone as their voices carried over the din of the street. Thankfully for Su Yong, it was all the distraction he needed to slip away. Not wasting a breath, he melted back into the flow of shadows, slipping through the cracks of the cityscape with practiced ease, his steps swift and silent as he cut his way toward the hangar bay. Step. 5 minutes later, he arrived at his destination and wasted no time to find a departing craft. 1 ticket to Su Prime, please, he said curtly at the counter, his voice low as he pulled a makeshift hood over his golden hair, concealing the proud gleam of his appearance. The clerk nodded, took his money and handed him a boarding slip, as within moments he joined the small queue for boarding. He kept his head bowed, his aura subdued, his ears sharp as he scanned the crowd for signs of danger. What's going on? Why did the clan recall me so suddenly? And who were those men tailing me? He wondered, his mind racing with questions as unease crawled down his spine. But then the gates opened, and the passengers filed into the transport craft, the hiss of pressure seals locking behind them as the ship's interior lights flared to life. *VRRRM. The hum of the engines vibrated through the hull, the familiar rhythm of departure settling into his chest. Finally, I should be safe now, Su Yong thought as he allowed himself the faintest breath of relief, his body easing back against the seat, when suddenly. Beast. Kaboom. The entire vessel erupted in a deafening blast, light and fire consuming the cabin in an instant, as the walls tore apart and metal screamed into shrapnel. The force hurled Su Yong forward into a maelstrom of chaos, his last thought before the inferno swallowed his senses. What the fuck is going on? This bonus chapter is sponsored by patron bookworm_0711, please thank her in the comments for the same. Chapter 612, Finding Out. Planet Wu-Tang, Su Yang's POV. Crackle. Hiss. Asterisk. Smoke billowed thick and black into the afternoon sky, mingling with the stench of burning metal and charred flesh, as Su Yang staggered out from the twisted wreckage of the transport craft. His vision swam, blood dripping steadily down his forehead where a sharp piece of shrapnel had split the skin above his brow. Step. He stumbled once, his knees buckling, before forcing himself upright, as he clutched his side as pain radiated through his ribs. He had felt death closing in when the explosion consumed the cabin, yet in that instant, a faint blue glow had wrapped around his body, an energy barrier humming to life and absorbing most of the impact. It was a life-saving artifact given to him by the Sioux clan after the terrorist attack on Lewis Hamilton Arena last year. However, just because he survived this assassination attempt, did not mean he felt any safer now than before. Surrounded by the broken bodies of the dead and the ruin of the craft, he now had to find a new way to get to safety. Huff. Huff. Asterisk. His chest rose and fell in ragged bursts, each breath cutting through his lungs like glass. He pressed a trembling hand against his wound, feeling the warmth of blood pooling in his palm, yet he pushed on, refusing to let weakness consume him. Step, step. Outside the shattered hull, voices rang out. Lock down the perimeter. Get a medic squad here, now. Dozens of armored officers had already surrounded the crash site, their weapons drawn and their eyes darting over the flames as though expecting the enemy to reveal themselves. Transcendent and Grandmaster auras flickered around him, coming from the law enforcement elites who wasted no time establishing barriers of their own, sealing the area with layers of energy fields to prevent another strike. Who attacked the craft? One officer barked, scanning the sky as if the answer would fall from above. Another knelt beside the corpse of a passenger, his face grim. Dead. All dead, every last one of them. Su Yang staggered out through the torn fuselage, his cloak burned and his hood ripped away, revealing his blood-matted golden hair that gleamed even beneath the ash. Dozens of heads turned toward him in that instant. Someone's alive. Over here, we've got a survivor. The officers rushed toward him, their boots clanging across debris, their oars pressing close as they reached to steady him. Easy, easy, you're wounded badly. Hold still, we'll get a healer. No. Su Yang rasped, shaking his head despite the blood trickling down his face. I am a Sioux clan descendant, I need to return home urgently. Craft. Find me another craft to go home with. He pleaded, as the officers exchanged grim looks. While everyone else on the craft was a commoner, only Su Yang seemed like a target of value, and hence they suspected that he was the main target of this assassination. Someone wants you dead, son. Protocol says that I keep you here, but looking at the determined expression on your face, I know you don't want to stick around, so let me instead fetch you that craft you want. One of the officers said, as he soon found yet another craft for Su Yang and successfully sent him off the planet. Planet Su Prime, a few hours later. After a few nerve-wracking hours, Su Yang finally arrived on Planet Su Prime. His shuttle touched down on the capital hangar, and the moment he stepped off, servants rushed forward, bowing hurriedly, their voices overlapping as they begged to clean his wounds, change his bloodied clothes, and restore his appearance before he met the patriarch. But Su Yang brushed them all aside, his golden eyes cold as steel, as he demanded to be taken to his father first. The servants exchanged worried glances, but none dared refuse him as they guided him swiftly through the familiar corridors of the Sioux clan's ancestral palace until at last the heavy doors of the patriarch's study opened. Inside, Su Tang sat slouched behind a long table, the weight of exhaustion etched into every line of his face. His once proud black hair now showed a few streaks of gray, while his skin seemed to have turned slightly paler, as if he had aged 20 years in the past 2 days. However, despite his worries, he smiled slightly upon seeing Su Yang, as he acknowledged his son with a nod. You've returned safely, he said, as Su Yang's heart sank looking at his haggard appearance. Father, Su Yang replied as he stepped closer, his boots echoing softly on the marble floor. What happened? Why did you call for me so urgently? Why do you look so sick? Su Tang raised his hand, gesturing silently for the servants to leave them alone. Once the room was emptied, he leaned forward, his gaze heavy, his voice carrying the weight of thunder even in its weariness. There is something you must hear, and you must be strong enough to accept it. Your grandfather, the Su family god, Su Ren, is dead. The words struck Su Yang like a hammer to the chest. What? He whispered, his eyes widening, his blood running cold as the world seemed to tilt beneath his feet. Grandfather is dead. Memories flooded his mind, the towering figure who had been the clan's shield for millennia, the man whose name was spoken with awe across the universe. To think such a man could fall felt impossible. Yet Su Tang's silence and the severity in his gaze confirmed what his heart already knew. He is dead, Su Tang repeated, his voice low but firm. And the other 5 clans are preparing to descend upon us like carrion birds. They will carve apart our lands, our name, our people. A storm is coming, Yang. The Su clan is about to face its most tumultuous time in history. Su Yang clenched his fists, his forehead still bleeding, his body trembling not from weakness but from the enormity of what he had just learned. How did grandfather die? He asked, as Su Tang shook his head and let out a deep sigh. It's not confirmed yet, but we assume it's a setup similar to the great betrayal of 2,000 years ago, where the others unexpectedly turned on him. Su Tang said, as Yang clutched his fists and felt his blood boil with fury. Chapter 613, A Request. Planet Su Prime, Su Yang's POV. Su Yang's body trembled with rage as the truth settled over him, for it shattered the very foundation of what he had been raised to believe about the universe. Weren't the 6 great clans supposed to stand as ironclad allies? Hadn't their heirs been bound together through carefully arranged marriages, each union designed to weave loyalty into bloodlines and reduce the very possibility of betrayal? Wasn't that the reason he himself had been secretly promised to Mu Li, the Mu clan's descendant, so that the Su name would remain intertwined with theirs? If all of that was true, then why the moment his grandfather fell, did all those bonds suddenly mean nothing? Why did the vows of brotherhood, the weight of marriage pacts, the promises etched into generations of blood, vanish like smoke? Why was it that once Su Ren was gone, the other 5 clans looked at the Su lands not as a legacy to respect, but as spoils to be carved apart? This is unacceptable, father. This degree of betrayal, it's simply unacceptable. Su Yang said, his knuckles turning white from strain, as Su Tang let out a deep sigh. I am past the point of anger and blame. I went through that storm of fury already, but now my thoughts no longer linger on why this is happening, only on what must be done. Su Tang said, as he tapped his fingers faintly against the armrest. I have already given instructions to the commanders on every planet, warning them of our peril and ordering them to strip their worlds of the most valuable assets and send everything to Su Prime at once. That much is already in motion. His eyes drifted upward, away from Su Yang's steady stare, settling instead on the carved beams of the ceiling above. But there are still countless things left undone, too many threads to tie, too many decisions yet to make. His voice grew quieter, almost as though he were speaking to himself, before finally returning to Su Yang with a heavy steadiness. I'm thinking of forcing a breakthrough to the demigod tier. The words struck like a blade, making Su Yang's eyes widen in shock as his breath caught in his throat. Father, no. That's too risky. You could be crippled or worse, you could die. He exclaimed, his voice trembling, his body stiff with horror at the thought. Forcing a breakthrough without preparation is the same as gambling your very life. You cannot. I can, and I must, Su Tang interrupted firmly, though his tone carried not anger but weary finality. His gaze was calm, almost resigned, as he met his son's desperate eyes. Do you think I do not know the risks? I know them better than anyone. But we have no choice. Without Su Ren, the clan has lost its divine shield. If the patriarch remains only a monarch while 5 great clans circle like vultures, then our doom is already written. Only as a demigod can I provide the deterrence we need, only then will they hesitate before carving apart our name. Su Yong clenched his fists so hard they shook, his lips parting as though to argue further, but no words came. Deep down, he knew his father was right, yet the thought of losing him in a reckless attempt burned like acid in his chest. Su Tang leaned back slightly, his fingers tightening around the armrest as his tone turned cold and pragmatic once more. In the meantime, I am strengthening the defenses of the planets we have chosen to hold. Su Prime, Vera, Kotal, and Mitrava will be fortified to their limits. I'm thinking I'll bring the planetary defensive arrays and mana shields from other planets to these 4, so we will have triple shields or even quadruple shields on our skies, and enough firepower to turn any intruding force to dust. We will make it so that they can only destroy the whole planet, but can never hope to capture it. He said, as his golden eyes, tired yet unyielding, stared straight into Su Yang's, his expression now turning hopeful. But amidst all this, there is something that I must request of you. In this time, Yang, you must not fail me. For you are the only one who can fulfill this request. Su Tang said, as Su Yang immediately placed his hand to his heart, and stood ready to receive any orders. Anything, father. You only have to say, he said, as Su Tang nodded with a heavy sense of dread. What I'm about to tell you, Yang, is something nobody inside the clan can know as of now, because it will only cause unnecessary misunderstandings at this stage. Hell, if it backfires, the clan might stop trusting me as its patriarch completely. However, I know in my heart that it must be done. Su Tang said, as Su Yang became all ears. I need you to become my envoy to the cult of Ascension, and convince them to join hands with the Su clan in this dark hour. I know that there is centuries of bad blood between the cult and the Su clan. However, if they come to our aid, it will deter the other clans from devouring us in full. And in return, we can cede the control of Planet Nemo and Planet Zero to the cult. They are both resource-rich planets, and the cult will benefit massively from controlling them. But in return, they must decisively come to our aid when called upon. Su Tang instructed, as Su Yang felt his worldview being shattered for the second time in the same day. All his life, he had grown up with this unbearable hatred towards the cult of Ascension, which, in part, had been instilled into him by his father and the rest of his clan, and yet, today, his father wanted to make those same evil people the clan's allies. I can't entrust this mission to anyone else. Plus, last I heard, their shadow dragon, Leo Skyshard, was your sworn brother in Rodova. If the two of you still share even some form of bond, then only you can be my envoy. Su Tang said hopefully, as Su Yang simply stood before him in stunned silence, neither accepting nor rejecting this mission before him. Chapter 614. No eternal friends, no eternal enemies. On a transport craft headed for planet Juxta. After leaving Soren's castle, Leo and Charles headed back to planet Juxta in complete silence. Charles sat stiff in his seat, his mind heavy with the implications of Su Ren's death and the looming universal war, while Leo's focus drifted inward. Without hesitation, he pulled out the Sevenfold Revelation Codex, and just as expected, the moment he opened it, golden lines etched themselves across the parchment, as the Codex stirred awake to acknowledge his achievement of grasping both the green and gold intents. Greater than you have mastered green, and have touched upon a god's reason to survive. Greater than green is the color of breath stolen at the precipice of death, the refusal to collapse when all else has fallen. It is the intent to survive. Greater than yet beware, for survival is not yours alone to decide. If your enemies perceive the reason you fight to live, they may snuff it out, strip it from you, and leave you with no tether to grasp upon. Greater than survive, but hide the why. For the moment they see your anchor, it becomes your chain. The letters shimmered, then disappeared moments later, as a new line of text began to show. Greater than you have also glimpsed gold. Greater than gold is the color of destiny, the branching of roads unseen, the choices that birth empires or graves. Greater than it is neither blessing nor curse, but a mirror of will. A single step may crown you sovereign of stars. Another may condemn you to ruin, buried beneath the weight of paths untaken. Greater than destiny is not gentle, it is a blade without mercy, forged by your own decisions. The codex informed, before suddenly starting to shine brightly, as that page of text got replaced by the final page of the manual. Greater than you have now mastered the 7 hues of intent. Crimson of bloodlust, maroon of dismay, sky of joy, pink of love, black of deceit, green of survival, gold of destiny. Greater than with these, the circle is whole and the codex complete. Greater than you are now the second soul in history to bear full mastery over the codex. Greater than guard this truth well, for to carry what none others can is to invite both reverence and ruin. The glow dimmed, the pages falling still once more. Leo sat frozen, the codex resting gently in his lap, his breath caught in his throat. The second in history, he whispered, his pride swelling, as he let out a soft smile. If he ever needed a self-confidence boost, or proof that he was an extremely talented warrior, this was it. He had successfully mastered what no one else except the creator of this method could. 4x. Meanwhile, on a transport craft bound for planet Juxta, Su Yang's POV. As per his father's request, Su Yang left for planet Juxta at once, his thoughts a storm of contradictions that refused to settle. All his life, the word cult had been synonymous with the word evil for him. From the time he could first hold a wooden blade, he had been told that the cult of ascension was a blight upon the universe, a gathering of zealots and tyrants who worshipped strength above all else. His tutors had painted them as monsters without conscience, his elders had spoken of them as sworn enemies, and his father had made it clear that their very existence was an insult to everything the Su clan stood for. And Su Yang had believed it. He had believed it so thoroughly that every swing of his blade during training, every ounce of mana he poured into his techniques, carried the silent vow that one day he would stand at the front lines when the Su clan finally moved to erase the cult once and for all. He had hated them without question, not because he had seen their cruelty with his own eyes, but because he was raised to hate them. Yet now, here he was, seated on a shuttle streaking across the stars, carrying with him his father's desperate request. A request not to kill the cult, nor to threaten them, but to kneel in front of them as an envoy and beg for their aid. Because suddenly, his sworn enemies had become his only hope, while those he had always called allies, the 6 great clans who had for centuries sworn brotherhood and intermarried their heirs into his bloodline, had cast the Su clan aside the moment weakness showed. The cult is evil. The righteous alliance is good. What a massive joke, he muttered, as he finally saw the truth of how things really were in the universe. Was the cult truly evil, or were they simply painted as such because it suited the Su clan's interests at the time? Were the great clans truly righteous, or were they merely self-serving wolves who wore the skin of noble allies while waiting for weakness to appear? The questions tore at him like blades. If good and evil were supposed to be absolute, then why did they change with the tilt of power? Why did his father, who once instilled in him the belief that the cult was an eternal enemy, now send him to clasp their hands? Why did the clans who once proclaimed brotherhood now salivate for Su blood? The truth pressed down on him with suffocating clarity. There were no eternal friends, nor eternal enemies. There was only interest, and the shifting tides of circumstance that determined whether one was an ally or foe. And if that was the reality of this universe, then what did that make him? A fool who had spent his entire life training to fight phantoms labeled as enemies, while ignoring the knife resting in the hands of those closest. His golden eyes flickered as he stared at the shuttle window, watching the blur of stars pass by. His chest tightened with a hollow ache, for something inside him was breaking, something that once gave him direction. Perhaps there was no good. Perhaps there was no evil. There was only strength, and how that strength was used in a given moment. Today the cult was an enemy, tomorrow they might be allies, and someday they would likely return to being enemies again. The same could be said for the great clans, for the righteous alliance, for anyone who walked the path of power in this endless universe. The realization left a bitter taste in his mouth. But even as despair tried to root itself in his heart, Su Yang clenched his jaw and straightened his spine. If the world had no true good and evil, then he would not waste his life chasing illusions. He would live with open eyes, acknowledging that loyalty and betrayal, ally and foe, were nothing but shadows cast by shifting light. And if that was the truth of this universe, then he would not be a pawn moved by others' definitions of morality. He would define his own. Thrum. The shuttle hummed as it cut through the void, carrying him closer to Juxta, closer to the cult he was supposed to beg for aid, closer to the storm that would either shatter his clan or force it to be reborn, as he wondered if he would see his friend once he landed. Chapter 615, Chaosbringer meets Charles. Planet Juxta, Leo's POV. Upon returning to Planet Juxta, Leo immediately sent a message to Chaosbringer, instructing him to come here at once, while he himself began preparations for his breakthrough to the Transcendent tier. With the Sevenfold Revelation Codex fully mastered, he was finally ready to ascend. What he required now was the highest purity Transcendent tier breakthrough potion in a proper chamber where the process could be carried out safely. Fortunately, Juxta already had one of the 3 Transcendent tier breakthrough rooms within the cult, so now, his only challenge was to acquire the breakthrough potion. "Where can I buy the breakthrough potion, Commander?" Leo asked, as Charles rubbed his chin in thought. "The potion is extremely valuable, and as much as I'd like the military to sponsor one for you, I doubt we can afford it." "You will have to pay for it yourself," Charles admitted, as Leo shook his head in mild disappointment. It seemed the military's finances were so strained that they could not even sponsor a single potion for their shadow dragon. Still, Leo remained unfazed. "How much will it cost?" he pressed. "On the open market, about 100 million, Charles replied, holding out both palms. "But if you purchase it at cost price, the same as what the military pays, it will be 25 million. That is the best option for you." Leo chuckled softly at the number. "Only 25. For a moment I thought it might be something beyond my reach." He pulled out his checkbook, scrawled his signature, and handed the slip over without hesitation. "I am a rich man, Commander. I earned more than enough before joining the cult." Charles clicked his tongue, half impressed and half annoyed. "Another secret you kept from me, boy. You carry far too many of them," he said before accepting the check as he retreated to his office to place the order. Minutes later, he returned with a rare smile across his face, as if carrying some good news. "You are fortunate. The chief potion expert within the cult happened to have a super pure vial in stock. Its purity was measured at 99.98%, the finest they have ever produced. It will be delivered within 6 hours. So I suggest that you use this time wisely. Clear your mind and prepare your body. For if your concentration falters during ascension even slightly due to existential overload, it may result in failure, and the backlash may kill you," Charles warned, as Leo cracked a small smile. Such high-quality potions were not always available, and obtaining one so quickly was nothing short of a blessing. "Thank you, Commander. I will be in the breakthrough room preparing myself. If someone named Chaosbringer arrives while I am inside, meet with him on my behalf. He will deliver the origin metal to you," he instructed, as with that, he turned and walked towards the breakthrough chamber, determined to steady his mind before the moment of ascension arrived. About 3 hours later. Time passed, and soon it was late evening, as the sun dipped over Juxta, painting the military base in fading streaks of crimson and violet, when a lieutenant hurried across the courtyard toward Charles, his face pale with unease. "Commander, there's a strange man here asking to see you. He says his name is Chaosbringer. Do you wish to meet him?" Charles exhaled a stream of smoke from the cigarette clutched between his lips, his expression remaining calm. He did not so much as twitch at the word strange man. After all, soldiers often judged people by their appearances, and most who were not cut from military cloth were dismissed as odd. Leo said he would send someone. "Let him through," Charles said simply, brushing the ash off his coat. But the moment his eyes landed on the figure striding confidently into the courtyard, his indifference cracked. The man was unlike anyone Charles had ever seen. Glitter dust sparkled across his face, catching the light of the setting sun so that every tilt of his head threw a shimmer of color. His nails were long and painted like a rainbow, each one a different shade that clashed and gleamed against the others. The clothes he wore seemed to mock convention itself, a flamboyant ensemble of silks stitched in curves and slits that made it impossible to tell if they were meant for a man or a woman. It was bizarre, outlandish, almost insulting to the military rigidity of the base. Charles's rugged skin prickled instinctively. If Leo had not specifically informed him that someone named Chaosbringer would come bearing something important, he would never have taken such a spectacle seriously. But since this weird man was supposed to be the protector of Origin Metal, Charles still treated him with respect. "Good evening, gentlemen, I'm Commander Charles," he said evenly, extending his hand. Chaosbringer's lips curved into a playful smile, his eyes glittering as brightly as his painted nails. He did not clasp Charles's hand in a firm warrior's grip. Instead, he bent his wrist gracefully, curving his palm downward, and set it delicately into Charles's, as though offering himself in some theatrical gesture. "Good evening. I'm Chaosbringer, Lord Boss's right-hand man. It is a pleasure." The voice was soft, lingering, each syllable drawn out with strange affection, as Charles couldn't help but feel a shiver crawl down his spine at the sheer unnaturalness of it, the skin along his arms tightening as though resisting the touch. But he did not flinch. He forced his jaw steady, his grip calm, his bearing unshaken even as his instincts screamed. "Did you bring the parcel?" Charles asked firmly, breaking the silence. Chaosbringer's smile widened. He tilted his head ever so slightly, then stepped closer. The distance between their chests shrank until no more than 5 centimeters separated them, close enough that Charles could see the glitter on his cheekbones catch every fleck of light. From that distance, Charles caught the faint sweetness of Chaosbringer's breath, fruity and sharp, washing over him like some perfume. As the shiver in his body deepened, the urge to recoil flaring like an instinctive alarm, yet he stood tall, staring evenly into the man's eccentric gaze. Without breaking eye contact, Chaosbringer slid his fingers into his storage ring and retrieved a dull, dense bar of metal that appeared like nothing special, but was yet the most precious substance in the universe, as he then placed it into Charles's open palm with an almost ceremonial flourish. "Store it quickly, before someone sees," Chaosbringer whispered, the words both a command and a tease, as Charles obeyed without hesitation, sliding the metal into his dimensional pouch and locking it away beneath layers of protective seals. "Thank you," he said, his tone dignified as his expression betrayed none of the discomfort still creeping across his skin. Chaosbringer gave a single approving nod, then turned his head to scan the courtyard with a languid air, before eventually settling his gaze on the lieutenant who had escorted him here. "Sweetie, my business here is done. Take me back," he said, his voice soft but carrying an odd command beneath the sweetness. The lieutenant glanced at Charles, half bewildered, but Charles gave a brief nod of affirmation. "Do as he asks." The lieutenant stiffened, then saluted and moved quickly to guide Chaosbringer back toward the gates. Charles watched the man go, watched the rainbow nails catch the dying light, watched the silken fabric sway with impossible flamboyance until at last he disappeared from sight. Only then did Charles exhale, long and heavy, rubbing his clawed fingers against the reptilian scales of his arms to quiet the goosebumps still prickling there. "By the gods," he muttered under his breath. But there was no time to dwell on discomfort. The parcel was secured. The mission was clear. Without delay, Charles turned on his heel, his coat flaring behind him as he strode toward the docking bay. He needed to leave for Ixtal at once. Soren was waiting, and the Origin Metal had to be delivered. Plus, the sooner it was out of his hands, the sooner he could put the unsettling presence of Chaosbringer behind him, as he truly hoped to never meet this man alone again. Chapter 616, Arriving at Juxta. Planet Juxta, Breakthrough Chamber, Leo's POV. The air inside the breakthrough chamber was still, the walls lined with runes that muted every outside sound, leaving only the quiet rhythm of Leo's own breathing. He lowered himself onto the smooth stone floor, crossing his legs as he rolled his shoulders back and stretched his body one final time, each tendon loosening, every joint unclenching, until he felt no lingering tension. His eyelids slipped shut, shutting out the world beyond these walls. All stray thoughts, all lingering doubts, all distractions were pushed out of his mind like drifting embers extinguished in water. Only a single truth remained, echoing in the silence of his heart. The transcendent tier is me moving past the status of a mere mortal. He thought, as he steadied his breathing, before recalling everything he had studied about this stage of ascension. The path forward was clear, yet merciless. To reach transcendence, his mana circuits would first have to be widened beyond their current limits, forced open with violent surges of energy that would sear through his body like molten fire. And from there, those same circuits would begin fusing closer with his nervous system and bloodstream, no longer separate pathways, but a single unified network through which mana could flow as naturally as breath. The second stage was the most dangerous, the expulsion of excess energy. For if he failed to release it cleanly, the volatile surge would rebound inward, collapsing organs, rupturing circuits, and snuffing out his life in an instant. And finally, the body would undergo saturation, his entire form drinking in natural mana until every cell, every fiber, every breath was infused with it. Success meant rebirth, the first step into a realm beyond mortality. While failure meant death, or worse, being reduced to a broken shell of what he once was. Leo's fists tightened faintly on his knees, but his mind did not waver. He knew the risks. He had faced death too many times to count, but this was no reckless gamble. This was the next step, an inevitable one towards his journey to become the strongest. Drawing in a long, steady breath, Leo pushed his consciousness inward, past flesh and bone, to the faint hum of mana flowing within him. This is it, today's my last day as a Grandmaster. .. Meanwhile, approaching cult territory, Su Yang's POV. The Su clan shuttle carved silently through the void as the oppressive glow of the cult's airspace loomed ahead, its vast defensive arrays stacked one upon another like an invisible fortresses, as its presence frightened the Su clan pilot, who looked terrified of flying ahead. Beep. Beep. Asterisk. Warning lights bathed the cockpit in red as a sharp, clipped voice burst through the communicator, carrying the chill of absolute authority. Unidentified craft, you are entering restricted cult territory. You have 60 seconds to provide identification or you will be eliminated. The pilot froze, his hands hovering uncertainly over the console as his eyes darted toward Su Yang in panic, but before he could utter more than a stammer, Su Yang had already risen from his seat, his golden gaze steady and cold as he reached forward and pulled the communicator from the pilot's trembling fingers. This is Su Yang, son of Su Tang, patriarch of the Su clan, he declared, his voice neither pleading nor defiant, but rather composed, and heavy with intent. I do not come as an enemy, but as a messenger. I request an audience with the Shadow Dragon, Leo Skyshard. The cockpit fell into silence, and for several long moments the only sound was the static hiss of the line, stretching out like an eternity as even Su Yang's pulse seemed to pound in his ears while the pilot held his breath beside him. Finally, the comms crackled again, the voice returning, just as cold and unyielding as before. Su Yang of the Su clan. Identity acknowledged. His shoulders eased slightly, though the words that followed made clear he was far from welcome inside cult lands. 2 escort crafts will rendezvous with you. You will descend in formation and follow all directives without deviation. Any attempt to alter course, to deploy weapons, or even to fire a single bullet will result in your immediate destruction. The pilot flinched as though struck, yet Su Yang gave a small nod, his face unchanging as the static quiet returned. And upon landing, the voice continued, final and merciless, you will surrender at once. You will submit to inspection, be bound in restraints, and be taken into custody. Only then will your request for an audience be considered. Disobey in any way, and you will not leave this airspace alive. The comms cut off with a sharp click, and soon after, Su Yang saw them, 2 sleek escort crafts gliding into view, their hulls obsidian black and marked with the glowing insignia of the cult, their cannons already trained on him as though daring him to test their patience. Maintain course, Su Yang instructed quietly, his eyes never leaving the predators flanking them. As the pilot obeyed, sweat dripping down his brow as he guided their shuttle into formation, the escorts tightening around them like jaws around prey. VRRRM. The shuttle descended through the thick atmosphere of planet Juxta, the shields of the base shimmering into view below as rows of towers bristled with mana cannons that tracked their every movement, while hangar bays opened with mechanical precision, receiving them as though the whole base had been alerted for his arrival. Land. The moment the shuttle touched down, the hiss of pressure locks echoed, and before the ramp could even lower fully, armed soldiers in cult uniforms surged forward, their synchronized steps shaking the metal floor as mana flared faintly off their weapons. "Step out slowly, Su Yang of the Su clan," a lieutenant barked, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Hands visible at all times. Su Yang rose without hesitation, his cloak brushing against the edge of the seat as he moved calmly down the ramp, his golden hair glinting faintly beneath the harsh hangar lights, while his golden eyes met the rows of soldiers waiting for him. Immediately, two of them approached, binding his wrists with glowing shackles that suppressed his aura, while others swept the shuttle with scanners, leaving not a single inch unchecked. Su Yang remained silent, his jaw firm as the handcuffs locked tight, cutting off his ability to channel mana, yet his posture never wavered, his steps measured as he allowed them to escort him into custody. This was the price of entering the cult's lands uninvited, and if he wanted to meet Leo, then he needed to endure this humiliation first. Chapter 617, Unexpected Arrival. Planet Juxta, Aegon Ver's POV. Ver arrived on Juxta unannounced, his steps light yet deliberate, for he carried the weight of strategy in his mind and sought out his cousin to finalize plans regarding the upcoming invasion of Planet Nemo. However, the moment he entered the cult's fortified base, he was intercepted by a lieutenant who barred his way with an apologetic bow. "I'm sorry, Lord Dragon, but Lord Shadow Dragon is currently inside the breakthrough chamber, and we have been advised to not let anyone disturb him," the lieutenant said politely, as Ver's eyes immediately brightened with delight. "Finally breaking through, he said, a grin spreading wide across his face, as he rubbed his palms together eagerly. "About time you stepped up to my level, cuz," he added with a playful chuckle, his pride mixing with genuine satisfaction at the news. "All right then, I'll see the commander instead. Is Commander Charles here?" he asked with casual curiosity, his arms folding behind his back as though he already expected the answer. "No, Lord Dragon, the commander isn't here either. He left just an hour ago for urgent business and has not returned yet," the lieutenant explained, his tone still careful and respectful. All right, that's cool. I'll wait then," Ver said lightly, his head bobbing in a slow nod as though he was already prepared to find temporary lodging until his cousin emerged. Yet before he could turn away, the lieutenant hesitated, as though something else weighed on his tongue, and finally leaned forward just enough to add in a lower tone. "But you know who is here. I heard the Su family young master just arrived here as a messenger. He is in our custody and is requesting that Lord Shadow Dragon come meet him. But since Lord Leo is currently preparing for his breakthrough, we have not disturbed him yet." "Oh," Ver said, his lips parting in mock surprise as his eyes gleamed sharply at the revelation, and for a moment the atmosphere around him shifted from casual amusement to keen interest. "The Su clan young master, here of all places," he mused, smacking his lips as though savoring the unexpected twist of fate. "Well, why don't I pay him a visit myself," he said, his tone carrying both mischief and calculation as he turned slightly, his long coat brushing the stone floor with each step. The lieutenant stiffened but quickly saluted, realizing that Ver's words were not a suggestion but a declaration, as he escorted him straight to the holding cell where Su Yang was currently being kept. Meanwhile within the holding cell, Su Yang's POV. Su Yang felt the limits of his patience being tested with how the cult treated him, as not only had they cuffed and chained him to a table, but they now even refused to let him see Leo, while making him wait for an uncertain amount of time. "For the millionth time, I'm asking you whether or not your men have informed Leo of my arrival yet?" Su Yang asked, as the lieutenant sitting in front of him gave him the same response he had given a dozen times before with a straight face. Lord Shadow Dragon is currently occupied with something important. We will inform him once he's free, the lieutenant said, as Su Yang rolled his eyes in disbelief. Never in his entire life had he ever been treated with such contempt and disrespect, as usually the Su family name garnered him more respect and VIP treatment everywhere he went. You know, if this was the Su clan, even if a messenger arrived from the cult, we would give them proper answers and treat them with basic respect. So, again, what is Leo occupied with? And when will he get here? Su Yang asked, as he stressed every syllable at the end, only for the lieutenant to give him the same emotionless reply once more. Sorry, I can't tell you what Lord Shadow Dragon is busy with. You will have to wait patiently till he's here. If you misbehave, we will throw you in a jail cell. The lieutenant threatened, as Su Yang clenched his jaw so tight, that the veins on his neck began to pop. "Aw fuck it," he said eventually, as he leaned back and closed his eyes, eventually accepting his fate of having to wait for an uncertain amount of time. However, the moment he went quiet, it was the lieutenant who spoke up. "That bit you said about the Su clan treating cult messengers with respect. Do you actually believe it?" The lieutenant asked suddenly, his tone sharper than before. Su Yang opened his eyes again, meeting the man's steady gaze, and nodded without hesitation. "Yes, of course I believe it. We are a clan of benevolent royals. All messengers are treated with respect inside the Su clan." The lieutenant scoffed at once, his lips curling as he let out a dry laugh. "Benevolent royals? You really believe that fairy tale? You must be more naive than I thought. What are you trying to imply?" Su Yang asked, his voice low, his pride stung by the scorn. "I'm telling you that if you think your clan has ever honored the rules of respect, you're a fool," the lieutenant replied bluntly, leaning back in his chair as his eyes narrowed. 2 centuries ago, the cult sent a messenger to your Su clan. Do you know what happened? He never even made it past the skies. He was killed before his craft was given permission to land. So forget about courtesy, forget about respect. Your people did not treat cult messengers with honor. They didn't even leave them alive. The words rang like steel striking stone, echoing far louder than the quiet room should have allowed. Su Yang's lips parted, his breath catching in his chest as his first instinct screamed at him to call the lieutenant a liar. However, for some inexplicable reason he did not. His father's lessons, his tutor's words, all the stories he had been fed since childhood rose up like a shield in his mind, painting his clan as noble and righteous rulers of the stars. But the lieutenant's face did not carry the smugness of someone weaving a taunt, nor the lightness of someone spinning a false tale. It was calm, steady, certain, and for the first time, doubt seeped into Su Yang's heart. Could it be true? Could the Su clan really have killed a messenger just for being from the cult? He thought, his golden eyes narrowing as unease twisted in his gut. Could it be that we never truly honored the universal laws of respect that messengers must not be killed? He wondered, as the possibility of the lieutenant's words being true struck him harder than he expected. If it really was true, then what did that make of his clan's legacy? What did that make of the benevolence he so firmly believed in? Su Yang clenched his fists, the chains around his wrists rattling faintly as silence thickened in the room. Maybe, just maybe, the Su clan wasn't what he had always thought it to be. Chapter 618, Banter. Holding cell, Su Yang's POV. For the next half an hour, Su Yang sat in absolute silence as he contemplated just how much of his universal view was flawed, every word of the lieutenant echoing in his head as doubt gnawed at his foundations, until, unexpectedly, the iron door of the cell clanged open and a freakishly handsome man walked into the cell. Clang! The lieutenant sitting opposite him immediately shot to his feet, his chair scraping sharply against the stone floor as he straightened his back and delivered a crisp salute, his head dipping in a deep bow. "Lord Dragon." The lieutenant's voice trailed as Ver strode forward with his usual swagger, brushing aside the formalities as though they were no more than an irritating breeze. He grasped the empty chair, spun it around without hesitation, and dropped onto it backwards, resting his arms over the top rail before leaning his chin lazily on his folded hands, his smile wide and unbothered. "Su Yang of the Su clan. Ver drawled, his tone dripping with a strange mix of mockery and curiosity. Su Yang's golden eyes locked on him without flinching, his wrist still chained to the table yet his voice sharp as steel. Cult dragon, and the universe's most wanted criminal. Aegon Ver. Ver's grin only widened at the words, his head tilting slightly as if savoring the title. "Oh, I try," he said with a casual flick of his fingers, accepting the insult as though it were a compliment. He glanced sideways at the lieutenant, snapping his fingers once in dismissal. "Leave us." The soldier hesitated only a second before bowing once more, his boots echoing across the cell as he exited, shutting the heavy door behind him with a dull thud. Silence settled again, but this time it carried a different weight, less of the cold isolation Su Yang had endured for the past half hour, and more of the unpredictable storm that Ver seemed to have dragged into the room with his entry. Tap tap. Ver tapped his knuckles idly against the chair's backrest as his eyes roamed across Su Yang's face, as if he were dissecting him without ever drawing a blade. "You know, I saw your fight at the Universal Circuit Finals last year. Back then you scored a point, didn't you? One of the 5. The other 4 were scored by cousin Leo," Ver said, bringing it up casually, as Su Yang nonchalantly accepted the comment. "Well, I would give you my autograph, but my hands are tied to this table you see, so I guess you will have to wait until I am free," Su Yang replied, as Ver's smile widened, accepting the retort with good humor. He had only come here to kill time, but judging by Su Yang's spunk, he felt that this conversation might actually turn out to be entertaining. "So, why are you here? And why do you want to see my cousin?" Ver asked, his expression shifting into something slightly more serious, as Su Yang only shrugged in response. "I will speak of my business with Leo Skyshard, and no one else." "Not even you, Lord Dragon," Su Yang said, his mocking tone deliberate, as Ver leaned back on the chair. "Ah, come on, do not be like that, golden-eyed boy. Just pretend I am my cousin and spill the beans. After all, whatever authority he has within the cult, I share as well," Ver teased, his grin playful, as Su Yang scoffed at the remark. "Just because you hold the title of dragon does not make you as qualified as Leo. Everyone in the wider universe knows that it was Leo Skyshard who won the battle between the two of you that day. The only reason you carry the title of dragon is because Leo did not want it. So, although you may think you are on the same footing as him, I at least know for sure in my heart that you are not," Su Yang said firmly, his voice cold. As it was only then that Ver's playfulness subsided, his ego bruised at last. "Yeah, you are not wrong on that. I did lose to my cousin that day," he admitted slowly, before his lips curled again. "But here is what you do not understand, you outsider. Cousin chose me to be dragon because he thought I was a better fit for the role than even him. We do everything together, every decision we make for the cult, we make together. So even if you think you will speak to him alone, I can promise you he will tell me everything later. Because him and me, we are tight like that." The words landed harder on Su Yang than he expected, as a frown crept across his face. The way Ver described his bond with Leo was the same way Su Yang remembered his own bond with him back at Rodova, when they had trained together, eaten together, and shared the same dream of reaching the top. And hence, even though he could not explain why, jealousy began to gnaw faintly at his heart. "You do not know him as well as I do," Su Yang said, his voice hardening. "We were batchmates in Rodova, we trained together, ate together, dreamed together. You think you know him. I guarantee you that I know him better. He will never leak a single word of what I tell him to a third party." Su Yang claimed, as Ver felt his right eye twitch at that comment, his smile faltering as indignation simmered beneath the surface. How dare this outsider suggest that his bond with Leo was stronger than his own? It was simply unacceptable. "Oh yeah, you really think you know him as well as I do? Son, we are bound by blood. Blood brothers. We practically have the same brain," Ver said arrogantly, as it was Su Yang's eye now that began to twitch. "Being bound by blood means nothing. If it did, why would Caliph kill the timeless assassin? On the other hand, a man chooses his own friends. And I am Leo's best friend," Su Yang said, as he leaned forward on the table, only for Ver to do the same, as the two stared into one another's soul from close range. Chapter 619, Breakthrough 1. Planet Juxta, Breakthrough Chamber, Leo's POV. Knock knock. A heavy knocking sound disturbed Leo's focused state of mind, as he calmly opened his eyes and turned towards the door, before gesturing for the soldier to come in. Tap tap tap. The footsteps of the soldier echoed throughout the vast breakthrough chamber, as he walked up to Leo and carefully handed him the extremely pure transcendent breakthrough potion. Good luck, sir. I hope you don't need them, but in case you do, medical staff will be right outside the door, monitoring your progress. The soldier said, as Leo did not bother replying, but only gave him a sharp nod. Thud. The door shut again, sealing the silence back into the chamber, leaving only a cocoon of isolation where triumph or ruin would unfold. Huff. Leo exhaled softly, the calm breath steadying his body, as his eyelids drifted close once more as he returned to stillness. His chest rose, then fell, as he let out a deep breath, the sound carrying into the vast chamber like a beast growling. Slowly, he lifted the crystalline vial, its surface glimmering faintly with a purity that seemed almost divine, and with a single motion, he cracked the seal. Pop! A faint, metallic aroma spilled into the air, raw energy condensed into liquid form, as he tilted the vial back and drank. Gulp gulp. The potion slid down his throat in a silken rush, yet the moment it entered his stomach it erupted like liquid fire, searing through his insides as though he had swallowed molten iron. His veins throbbed, his circuits screamed, and his heart pounded like a war drum. The potion dissolved instantly into pure mana, flooding every corner of his body in an untamed tide, battering against the walls of his circuits in a merciless attempt to widen them. Leo's back arched as he clenched his teeth, forcing himself to endure the agony. The surge rushed upward into his skull, burning through the delicate threads of his nervous system, fusing circuit and nerve together into one, while another wave cascaded downward through his bones, bleeding into his bloodstream until every droplet of his essence began to shimmer faintly with the glow of mana. Shiver. His entire form trembled, a storm trapped inside flesh. Good. This is what I expected, he thought grimly, his consciousness teetering on the edge of clarity, as he willed himself to embrace the pain rather than shy from it. He knew the path of transcendence was merciless, it demanded that he endure this trial without flinching, or be consumed in the attempt. FSSHHH. Mana flooded his body, his natural circuits tore open, then reformed wider, threads of his nervous system knitting together with the channels, as if nature itself was reweaving him into something new. The pressure was suffocating, yet his will stood firm. The first instinct was survival, which prompted him to get rid of the foreign energy immediately. However, Leo knew survival alone would not tame this storm. He needed to control and command the raging energy before it shattered him, but first, he needed to let it overwhelm his circuits to the brink of breakthrough. Inhale. Exhale. 1 second passed, then 2, then 5, as it was only then that Leo started to make his move. All right. It's becoming unbearable now, I guess it's time to start getting rid of the excess energy. Leo thought, as he curled his fingers around his dagger and began summoning his techniques one after another in rapid succession, for it was the only outlet to keep the mana flow from destroying him. 1,000 phantom slashes. His arms blurred, phantom blades lashing out in arcs of shimmering intent, scattering across the chamber in bursts of afterimage, until the air itself seemed shredded by the assault. Enhance. His body swelled with strength as he forcefully layered the technique upon himself, muscles trembling, bones groaning under the weight of unnatural reinforcement, sweat beading across his forehead even as the potion pushed him past his limits. Fade step. His form flickered, sliding between one spot and another in near silence, his aura retracting into nothingness and then reappearing like a whisper of death itself, as he fought to maintain balance. Storm flash traverse. His figure shot forward in a blinding line, movement like lightning slashing through the chamber before abruptly halting, his breath ragged as sweat beads danced across his skin. Astral hook bind. Threads of mana lashed outward like chains, grasping invisible anchors, pulling taut, stretching the strain away from his circuits even as his body screamed from the overload. Each technique bled energy from his core, each one a release valve against the flood that threatened to drown him. Yet every time he expended it, the potion filled him again with even greater force, like a relentless tide that rose higher no matter how much was drained. My head. It's turning dizzy. Leo muttered, as unexpectedly at this critical moment, he began to lose the clarity of his mind. His vision began to shake, his mind slipping into haze, as the weight of existential overload crashed into him like waves upon stone. Fuck, he said, as he grit his teeth and tried to center himself, yet the focus faltered, his rhythm breaking at the worst possible moment. Celestial Veil. He willed the protective cocoon of invulnerability to form, a skill he had practiced countless times, a reflex carved into instinct itself, yet nothing appeared. His body twitched, his circuits seized, and mana that should have flowed outward instead rebounded inward, slamming into him like a hammer blow from within. He had made a mistake while casting the move, and as a result, he wasted precious time in getting rid of the excess energy that should not have been wasted. Twitch. Stagger. His chest convulsed as he staggered, his breath tearing from his lungs, blood flecking the corner of his lips as his heart thundered erratically against the cage of his ribs. The energy piled upon itself, building higher, refusing to release, his channels straining to the brink of rupture. Focus, I need to focus. The thought carved itself into the haze, sharp and unyielding, as if it was his only anchor left in this storm. I can do this, he assured himself, as he pushed his body into motion again. Storm flash traverse. His form vanished and reappeared, streaks of light tearing through the chamber, ripping mana outward as his body devoured the strain. Thousand phantom slashes. His blades erupted again, not as controlled arcs but as wild, furious crescents, carving through air and stone alike, scattering the excess energy into the runes lining the chamber, each strike a desperate plea for release. The chamber shook faintly under the barrage, the reinforced runes drinking in the overflow, stabilizing the space where lesser walls would have already crumbled. Leo's chest heaved, his eyes wild for a heartbeat before steadying once again. The smooth, wide mana channels forged by his unique mana heart had managed to bear the unnatural torrent, bleeding it into rhythm instead of collapse, allowing him to survive what should have been a fatal backlash. However, he wasn't out of the woods yet. Only half the ascension process was complete, and he needed to maintain his focus for at least 15 more minutes while his body transformed, and the two without making any mistakes. I cannot afford another slip. Not here, not now. The storm still raged within him, each surge of mana more violent than the last, circuits widening further, his body screaming, yet the anchor of his will held. He had belief in himself that he would weather this storm. After all, his destiny was too large for him to fail here. Chapter 620, Breakthrough complete. The next 15 minutes were one of the most difficult moments of Leo's life, as while on one hand existential overload made it extremely difficult for him to focus on breaking through sheer willpower, he managed to get through the tough times without making another mistake. Time became a slow grind of pain and breath, as the potion's tide raged and receded in cruel waves, while his circuits widened another hair's breadth with each passing heartbeat. He rode the storm without flinching, letting it batter him as he kept his mind lashed to a single point of focus, until at last the violence began to soften. 25 minutes after he first drank the potion, the pressure that had tried to tear him apart finally started to ebb, as a steady warmth replaced it. What remained was residue, not a flood, and he found himself capable of letting it out without too much strain. Fade step. He moved through the chamber like a blade cutting fog, releasing, guiding, and bleeding the surplus mana into the rune-lined floor, while his breath steadied and his vision cleared. A final swell rose from his core, seeking purchase, and he met it with calm hands and a calm mind, shaping it outward as if he were sculpting light. Then the storm broke. The potion's power subsided fully, its task complete, as the last threads of excess mana slipped from his pores like faint mist, leaving his body faintly luminous and strangely weightless. The tension that had gripped him all this time suddenly unwound all at once, as he dropped to one knee, then to both, as fatigue seized him in a firm embrace. Ha, ha, he laughed, breathless and raw, sweat streaking his face while his chest heaved with the ache of survival. I did it. I'm a transcendent now. The words tasted unreal and perfect at the same time, as a grin pulled at his lips despite the tremor in his limbs. He shut his eyes and sank inward, not to sleep, but to inspect the new shape of himself. At first it felt like standing on the shore of a new ocean, the air salt sweet and the pull of the tide unfamiliar, as the boundaries of his body had shifted in quiet, profound ways. His mana circuits no longer traced a separate map from his nerves and vessels, as at certain junctions they had merged, knit together by the breakthrough's forge, so that brain commands, mana current, and blood circulation now spoke a common language. This feels amazing, he thought, as he leaned into that language. He whispered a thought at the base of his skull, and the command rippled outward along nerves and mana channels in the same breath, allowing him to take command of things he could never control before. Throughout his life, if there was one part of his body that he could never control at will, it was his heart, and his circulatory system, as no normal human could control their heartbeat at will. However, after this breakthrough, he could achieve that impossible feat. Now, with his three vital systems intertwined, he could guide blood where he wanted it to go, and could also control its pressure and pulse. This meant that, if he wanted, he could now guide blood to important muscle groups in the heat of a battle for added strength, or away from certain areas if he was ever cut open or was seriously injured. This new ability will definitely come handy, he thought, as he introspected some more and found more changes to his body. My muscles, they have improved in quality by leaps and bounds. He mused, as he introspected his muscle density, which appeared thicker and stronger than ever before. However, that was not all. Now, for the first time in his life, he realized that he could unlock the full 100% potential of his muscles at will, which was previously only activated by his brain in a fight-or-flight situation, under the influence of adrenaline. Previously during training, he could only unlock about 70–80% of his absolute peak strength, but he no longer had that restriction anymore, as with his tri-circuits fusing, he now had full control over all nervous functions. Not only can I unlock the full potential of my muscles, but I can also operate them with a precision unlike ever before. My dexterity has gone through the roof. Leo realized, as he felt unprecedented control over every single strand of muscle in his body. He could now contract muscles to a precise breath. A quarter pull here, a three-quarter there, with tendons sliding like silk over oiled pulleys while the nervous system kept pace, translating intention into exact compliance. Fingers that had always been lethal became instruments now. He could feel the precise moment a knuckle wanted to overcommit, and he could hold it back with ease, as though the body were a loyal hound that no longer needed the leash. This feeling, it's something else, Leo said, as he flexed both hands slowly, spreading the fingers until the joints whispered, then closing them again until the tendons drew taut lines beneath the skin. Jump. He rose to his feet in a single smooth motion, no wobble, no pause, and reached for his dagger, the grip settling into his palm like an old friend meeting the new him, before bringing the blade up to his nose and unleashing a casual, unhurried slash. Shroom. A neat line carved itself into the reinforced floor, narrow and deep, as mana harmonized with muscle at the instant of contact. Carve. He had not swung hard, yet the devastation the blow caused was akin to his peak strength at Grandmaster, which was way beyond his expectations. Holy shit, he muttered, as he realized that his new strength was no joke. Having risen in tier, everything about him had improved. His natural speed, strength, reflexes, they had all gone up, and so had the lethality of his skills. Every active skill in his arsenal was 30–70% stronger now, with some of his passive skills growing even stronger. Awesome, he murmured, the word slipping out with a grin he did not bother to hide, as his body felt light and deadly at once. Yet for all the improvements, one change stood above the rest, which was in the form of the faster regeneration passive, improving by a huge margin. As after his breakthrough, faster regeneration was no longer just a background hum, but a valuable bloodline skill that was finally able to show its real value. My stamina. It feels endless now, Leo assessed, as never before in his life had he felt as energetic as he did now, to the point where he realized that he might not have to sleep or eat for months on end. Faster regeneration kept filling his body with endless reserves of energy, while also repairing the micro-tears within his body at an unprecedented rate. This has greatly improved my odds of escaping from a relentless pursuit and fighting a never-ending war. Leo thought with a smile, as he cracked his neck. What else is new? He mused, trying to look for more improvements, but before he could, suddenly the medics opened the door to the breakthrough chamber and rushed in. Lord Shadow Dragon, are you feeling all right? They asked, as Leo simply smiled and said, never been better. Chapter 621. No Other Choice. Planet Ixtal, Soren's castle, Charles's paw. Charles handed over the block of origin metal to Soren, who cradled it in his palm as if he were cradling a newborn, his withered fingers trembling ever so slightly, not from weakness but from the profound awe that shone through his ancient gaze. 2,000 years of searching for just 25 grams of this thing, and now you hand me a slab weighing 1,200, Soren whispered, his lips curling into a smile so complete that it seemed to chase away every shadow carved into his aged face, as his eyes gleamed with the reverence of a pilgrim who had finally touched his god. The block itself looked anything but divine. It bore none of the otherworldly shimmer of relics or the luminous brilliance of refined ores. Instead, it appeared to be nothing more than a plain, steel-like mass, dull in its finish and unremarkable to the naked eye, save for its weight, which was merely twice that of normal steel, hardly enough to warrant such reverence. Yet in Soren's hands, it became a treasure beyond measure, for even this block of metal in his hands could be used to bludgeon a god to death. Sigh. Letting out a deep sigh, Soren stored the metal away within his storage ring, before looking towards Charles with 1,000 emotions rising in his eyes. As you already know, I must refine this metal first before it can be forged into a blade, and to do so, I have to leave the cult for a while, Soren began, his voice steady but laced with gravity. It may take me north of a year before I can return. So until then, I will leave you as the acting sect master of the cult of Ascension. Charles dropped into a deep bow, his right arm pressed to his chest, as he immediately accepted the honor. As you command, Lord Soren, he said, as Soren flicked his hand faintly, dismissing the formality. There is no need to tell anyone else about my departure, especially the council. None of us know what they would do if they learned I was gone. And worse, we cannot be sure whether news of my absence might be leaked to our enemies. I intend to depart tomorrow without disturbance, and before I go, I will cover this castle with a divine barrier strong enough to block all probing senses. So even if the other gods grow suspicious of where I am, they will never be sure of what is happening within the cult, because they'll never be able to look inside my castle. And that uncertainty of whether I'm really here or not, will keep their hands tied, at least for a year at minimum. Soren said, as Charles inclined his head, listening intently, as he committed every word that Soren spoke to the depths of his memory. But let us say something bad happens, something unexpected, Soren continued, his golden eyes narrowing faintly as though he were speaking not to Charles but to the walls themselves. Then I need you to protect the cult as best as you can, which I know you will. But remember this, old friend, your goal will not be decisive victory. Your goal will be to buy time. Delay them, retreat if necessary, abandon ground if you must, but live and endure until I return. Do not bleed yourself for hollow pride, for if you fall while I am gone, then the next most powerful individual within this cult is a 25-year-old boy with 2 monarch-tier servants to his name. And I am not ready to entrust the fate of the cult to him just yet. Charles's jaw tightened, but he did not speak, for he too knew that Soren's words were true. Finally, Soren said, lifting 3 faintly glowing orbs from his sleeve, each one swirling with caged fragments of his own divine aura. I have stored a measure of myself within these 3 crystal balls. Should the cult find itself threatened, and you need to bluff an enemy into believing that I still watch over them, then crush one. Or if you need to unleash a spontaneous burst of overwhelming aura to incapacitate an opponent, crush it. They will not know the difference. He pressed the orbs into Charles's outstretched hand, his own gnarled fingers lingering over Charles's rough knuckles as his expression turned unusually fragile. I am sorry, old friend, Soren whispered, his voice low enough to carry only to the ears before him. But I do not know if I will return from this journey alive. I believe I will, yet with these injuries festering in me, I cannot be certain. So if I do not return after a year and a half, then you must be prepared to assume the worst. Charles's eyes slid away, unable to meet the piercing honesty in Soren's gaze, his usually stoic features twitching faintly as if his pride warred with grief. I know I leave the cult in good hands, Soren continued, both hands now resting firmly on Charles's shoulders, the gesture heavy with trust. But if this absence becomes permanent, then you must devote everything to making Skyshard the next god of the cult. If my father acknowledged the boy in death and asked me to hand him such an advanced aura manual, it can only mean he believes in his potential as a warrior. And if my father, with his impossibly high standards, acknowledges someone's talent, then I too believe he's special, special in ways the rest of us cannot yet fathom. At last, Charles turned his head, locking eyes with the god he had served for centuries, his watery gaze hard but steady, his chest rising with a deep breath as he nodded once. Do not worry about permanence, old man. Just focus on coming back alive first, Charles said quietly, his voice carrying both respect and defiance in the same note. Soren chuckled faintly, though there was little mirth in it, the sound like brittle glass. I will try. But if fate decides otherwise. He began but paused, as the two men stood in silence, the moment stretching long as though both were memorizing the presence of the other, one preparing to leave, while the other prepared to carry a burden that was still too heavy for his shoulders. However, both knew they had no other option. Both knew, this had to be done. Chapter 622, Chaos Brews. Inside the Juxta medical wing, Leo's POV. Leo had to undergo a thorough medical examination after his ascension was complete before the doctors cleared him to resume his routine life. The whole process took a total of 2 hours, throughout which he wasn't bothered with any other news. I have great news for you, Lord Shadow Dragon. It looks like you're perfectly healed after your ascension and that your body has stabilized to the new build. Congratulations. You're now a transcendent, the head doctor said, as Leo stood up from the examination bed and offered him a firm handshake. Thank you, doctor, I feel good too, so yeah, I guess the ascension went smoothly. Leo acknowledged, before slipping his robes back over his shoulders and making his way out of the medical wing. Now that I'm a transcendent, I should definitely challenge Dumpy to a sparring match, just to get a feel of how strong I really am as compared to before. He's been a transcendent for a while now and is more talented than most human fighters around. He'll be a useful measuring stick. Leo muttered to himself, as he planned to visit Dumpy next, when suddenly, he was interrupted by a lieutenant, who stood before him like he had an urgent message to pass on. Sorry to bother you, Lord Shadow Dragon, but I have a message for you. The lieutenant said, as Leo nodded and gestured for him to go on. Sir, firstly, Lord Dragon is here. He arrived approximately 4 hours ago, and wanted to discuss something important with you. Secondly, a certain, Su Yong, from the Su clan is here to see you. He arrived about 6 hours ago, and is currently being detained in the holding room. Finally, Lord Dragon is currently interrogating this Su man, and the two of them have been spotted talking for the last 2 hours. The lieutenant informed, as Leo raised an eyebrow in surprise. Su Yong was here, and more importantly than that, he was talking to Ver. All right, I'll visit them first, I guess, Leo said, as he tried to downplay his excitement for seeing Su Yong. However, although he did not let his joy be revealed in front of the soldier, as soon as he was alone, he grinned from ear to ear, as he felt extremely happy at the prospect of getting to see his old friend after such a long time. Meanwhile, within the holding cell, Su Yong and Aegon Ver. The atmosphere within the holding cell felt tense in a comedic way. As while neither Ver, nor Su Yong, felt any animosity towards one another, both behaved strangely competitive towards each other, as if the other was their most fierce rival. I won the interstellar circuits twice, that's 2 times. In case you're not familiar with the meaning of the word twice. It's the biggest competition in the universe. And proof that I'm one of the finest fighters in the universe. Not this tiny cult. The universe, Su Yang said, as he put extra emphasis on the word, universe. Please, you talk as if you won it alone, when Rodova is the most successful academy to win the circuits in the history of the sport. And when my cousin single-handedly carried your ass to victory last year. Take your ego down a notch, you Grandmaster weakling. I'm 2 years younger than you, but still a tier above you. In terms of talent, we are not in the same league. Ver shot back, as gestured, steps, with his hands, to drive the point home that he was a cut above Su Yang in terms of talent. What? Since when is rising through the ranks fast a true measure of talent? Son, I'm on the verge of a breakthrough to transcendent. I can probably do it in the next week or two. Also, didn't your ass get beat by Leo, who if you forgot, was also a Grandmaster? Son, imagine how weak your talent is, if despite being a tier stronger, you're getting whooped by weaker fighters. Su Yang clapped back, as Ver shook his head as if he could not believe the disrespect. Firstly, I'm not your son. So stop calling me that. Secondly, I can whoop your ass anytime, any day, tier difference or not. You think I'm joking? We can go a few rounds right now. Ver said, as Su Yang's golden eyes lit up at the proposition. Oh yeah, you wanna go a few rounds? Fine, I'll oblige. I'll whoop your ass in front of the whole cult. I ain't scared of you. Su Yang said, while yanking at the chains that bound him to the table as he accepted the challenge. Alright, let's do it. Ver said as he turned and pointed towards the guards that he knew were listening in on the conversation. Guards. Guards. Come in here. Free this blonde monkey from his binds, I'm going to beat some respect into his ass. Ver demanded, as the guards rushed in, with their hands raised in surrender, as they tried their best to defuse the situation. Clank. Clank. Come on. You heard him, free me. Su Yang demanded, as one guard pointed at him angrily, his eyes wide, while the other tried to explain to Ver that they could not unhand Su Yang for safety purposes. I'm sorry Lord Dragon, but I don't really think it's wise to let him go free. There's no saying what damage he can cause to the base, or what his true intentions are. I'm afraid, in the absence of Commander Charles, I really cannot unhand him. As doing so would violate several military protocols, the guard explained. However, Ver wanted to hear none of it. Fuck the protocols. Also, he's a fucking Grandmaster, what's the most he can do? Throw a /I block with my pinky. Ver mocked, as his insults only agitated Su Yang even more, who now began struggling even harder against his chains. Please sir, we need you to be more mature. The guard begged. However, the overall situation had already devolved into pure chaos, with neither Ver, nor Yang, looking like they were interested in rationale or reason. Chapter 623, Long-Awaited Reunion. Planet Juxta, the holding cell, Leo's POV. Leo strolled to the holding cell with a wide grin stretching on his face. However, he was beyond stunned when he arrived, and observed the ongoing chaos. He almost couldn't believe the scene unfolding before his eyes, as he stood frozen at the threshold, watching his cousin and his old friend squabbling like children in a marketplace, their voices overlapping with insults and half-challenges while the guards stumbled about in a desperate attempt to keep order, their hands raised in surrender as though they were referees caught in the middle of two beasts clawing for dominance. Clang. Pull. Chains rattled as Su Yang tugged against his binds, his golden eyes blazing with indignation, while Ver leaned forward with that infuriating grin of his, egging him on like this was some tavern brawl instead of a holding cell inside the cult's stronghold. Su Yang, you're a prisoner here, don't forget your place. Please Lord Dragon, I need you to stay calm. The guards shouted over one another, trying to calm them both down, but their pleas dissolved into the chaos, until at last Leo's voice cut through the din, sharp and unmistakable. What the hell is going on here? He demanded, his tone carrying enough weight that the room seemed to shrink around it. Every head turned at once, the guards stiffening, Ver's grin freezing mid-taunt, and even Su Yang falling silent as his wrists stilled against the chains, the noise collapsing into a silence so sudden it felt unnatural, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Lord Shadow Dragon, thank the heavens you're here. Lord Dragon is demanding to fight Su Yang, but protocol forbids us from letting him go free, one of the guards blurted, his voice carrying both relief and desperation, as Leo's gaze snapped toward Ver, as he gave him a glare so sharp that his cousin instinctively shrank back in his chair. Why do you want to fight him? Leo asked evenly, one brow lifting as though the very question itself was ridiculous, as Ver immediately stumbled over his words. He started it. He thinks he can take me on anytime, any day, and he called me, son, like I'm some punk kid. I'm not a punk, I'll own his ass if we fight, Ver muttered defensively, his pride stung as he pointed at Su Yang, who looked like he could not believe what he had just heard. Skyshard, I swear it's him who started it, Su Yang fired back, his golden eyes flaring as he tugged once against his chains. And on top of that, he thinks winning the circuits twice is some easy thing. Like, what? Winning the circuits is a massive achievement. Tell him that. Leo pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose, inhaling slowly before exhaling a long, weary sigh, his expression falling into one of utter disappointment as his gaze swept across both of them. Seriously. This is how the Lord Dragon of the cult carries himself. He said at last, his voice calm yet razor-edged, each word landing with the sting of a whip. Like a 5-year-old with no self-restraint. Ver wilted instantly under the rebuke, his grin long gone as his head dropped low in shame. For a brief moment, Su Yang chuckled, savoring the sight of Ver being dressed down, but Leo's eyes cut to him next, and the amusement froze on his lips. And you, Leo said slowly, his voice suddenly heavier. You're the young master of the Su clan, heir to your patriarch. Show some damn class. The reprimand was just as sharp, and Su Yang too found himself bowing his head, his earlier arrogance dissolving into silence beneath Leo's gaze. You're both too old to be behaving like children, so calm down, say you're sorry, and make up. Leo demanded, as Ver immediately complied. I'm sorry, the dragon said, as Su Yang repeated the words immediately. I'm sorry as well, he said, as Leo gave an approving nod to both, before gesturing for the guards to take their leave. Don't worry, I've got this now, Leo assured, as the guards quietly thanked him before moving out the door. Thud. The silence returned to the room once the heavy metal door was sealed shut, as Leo folded his arms and cast a glance towards Su Yang, his demeanor colder than what he initially planned. So, why are you here? He asked, as Su Yang frowned at the directness of the question. He had expected a warmer welcome, since the two of them were seeing each other after such a long time, however, his previous fight seemed to have ruined that. What? You aren't even going to say you're happy to see me or something? Jumping straight to business, he protested, as Ver immediately snickered from across the table. What are you? His girlfriend? Ver mocked, as one could see on his face that he could not resist the temptation of throwing that jab. However, as a result of his little stunt, Leo immediately shot him a warning glare that said, "Behave or I'll throw you out too," as he suddenly became interested in doodling his thumbs. Sigh. Letting out a deep sigh, Leo looked at Su Yang again, as he unfolded his arms and let out a big smile. Hey man, of course I'm happy to see you. It's been so long, he said, as he placed his own palm in Su Yang's shackled hands for a firm handshake. The second year at the academy wasn't the same without you. Mu Shen and Mu Ryan missed you too, but everyone else hated you. We weren't allowed to even say your name. Everyone felt like you betrayed us. Su Yang expressed, as Leo felt his face contort slightly at the bittersweet memories. He had no deep attachment to Mu Shen or Mu Ryan, but it was good to know that they missed him too. Perhaps, he was truer friend to them than he had thought. Chapter 624, Proposition. Juxta Military Base, the Holding Cell, Leo's POV. So, why are you here, man? I don't think the Su clan has made an official diplomatic outreach to the cult in forever, so are you here on behalf of the Su clan, or are you here for yourself? Leo asked once the reunion was over, as Su Yang's golden eyes sharpened with sudden seriousness. I don't want to discuss business in front of him, unless you trust him completely. Su Yang said, his chin tilting faintly toward Ver, who frowned for being put at the spot. I trust him completely, Leo replied at once, his tone steady as his gaze did not waver. Ver is my cousin, and he is the cult's dragon with an army of his own. If you are here in an official capacity, then he is the man you need to ask for help. The words carried enough weight to make Ver's chest visibly puff out, his back straightening as though every inch of him swelled from that simple vote of confidence, the title he wore seeming to grow heavier and brighter as he sat taller in his seat. Well, all right, if you trust him, then I guess it's fine, Su Yang admitted, exhaling a long sigh, as his voice softened and his tone grew grave. I don't know if you've heard about this yet, but my grandfather, the Su family god, has been betrayed by the other great clans and the universal government. We don't know for sure what's happened to him, but we are presuming he might be dead. What? Ver said, his eyes widening as the words struck him like a hammer, his voice almost breaking as disbelief shook his usually unflappable confidence. Leo, however, simply nodded, his expression calm and unreadable. Yeah, I heard about it. It was an unexpected development. You knew about this. Ver repeated, his voice rising with indignation as he turned sharply toward his cousin. Calm down, Leo said evenly, cutting him off with a look. Try to keep up. As the room stilled once more, Su Yang continued with the weight of centuries pressing on his shoulders. The news spreading across the universe is that the 5 great clans are now planning to turn on the Su clan, seizing our lands now that grandfather is gone. And we are desperate to cling to whatever we can. His head dipped slightly, shame tugging at his words even as his pride strained to hold them steady. We know we cannot hold everything, which is why I've come with a proposition for the cult, one that I believe will be mutually beneficial, if you choose to accept it. His gaze alternated between Leo and Ver, as though measuring them both, testing whether his words would find fertile ground here in enemy soil. We are prepared to offer you 2 planets in return for one thing, that the cult intervene and protect planet Su Prime during a critical attack in the future, should we ever call upon you. As of now, we do not believe any of the gods from the other great clans would stoop to personal involvement in something as petty as planetary conquest, but with the cult standing by us as a deterrent, we can be certain they will stay out of it. Because if they do get involved, then so shall Soren. Su Yang's voice trailed into silence, leaving only the faint clink of his chains against the table as he searched their faces for any reaction. To his dismay, Leo did not show much reaction to his words, his face remaining as impassive as ever, while Ver seemed lost in thought, as he seemed to weigh the pros and cons of this deal in his head. On one hand, Ver knew that the Su clan, even without the Su god, was still a formidable force. They controlled a total of 78 planets scattered across the universe, commanded roughly 30 monarch-tier warriors under their banners, and were a clan that were both wealthy and technologically advanced. In this hostile universe, where the cult stood isolated and bereft of allies, forging a bond with the Su clan was hardly the worst idea, yet the true question that lingered was whether the price of offering them aid would outweigh the reward. You're asking us to commit our forces to safeguard Su Prime, Ver said finally, his tone even, though the sharp gleam in his eyes betrayed the whirl of thoughts racing behind them. That's no small thing, Su Yang. You speak of it like a simple deterrent, but deterrence only works until someone dares to call the bluff. What happens when the cult sends fleets, and the other clans decide to test how far we're willing to go? What happens when they measure our strength against theirs? Su Yang met his words without flinching, his golden eyes steady. I'm not asking you to bleed for us endlessly. I'm asking for a single guarantee. If Su Prime is attacked, then you come to help us out. We are already pulling out of 74 of the 78 planets we control, and want to hold on to only 4. Which means, we will defend those 4 like hell. It won't be a one-sided war, that much I promise, we just need you to be on our side at the right moment. Su Yang explained, as Leo shrugged his shoulders in slight surprise. He did not expect the Su clan to decisively pull out of 74 planets. That was definitely a bold plan, which did improve the chances of their survival massively. For instead of focusing on multiple battlefronts, they could not focus on saving only a very limited few. This is a lot to take in at once, Ver said as he leaned back slightly in his chair and began tapping a finger against the armrest. For the cult, gaining control over 2 extra planets was precious. However, the real benefit was always getting a strong ally in the form of the Sioux clan. However, the question remained. Was the Dragon Army ready for a war of this scale? Against the combined might of 5 clans. 2 planets. Ver muttered at last, his eyes flicking briefly to Leo as though expecting him to weigh in, yet his cousin remained silent, his gaze fixed squarely on Su Yong, as if waiting to hear what else the young master of the Sioux clan had left to offer. Su Yong did not hesitate. We are not fools, Skyshard. We know the cult will not move for free. That is why I bring you this proposition. 2 planets, including Nemo, which is a goldmine for resources. And we give you full ownership of it. You won't have to fire a single shot. We will retreat and hand you the entire planet without bloodshed. So what do you say? Take my deal and the cult gains territory, resources, and perhaps most importantly, an ally. Tell me, is that not worth the risk? The question lingered, heavy and deliberate, as silence settled over the room again, broken only by the clanking of chains as Su Yong shuffled in his seat, while Leo and Ver looked into each other's eyes, as if unsure on what to do. Chapter 625, A Desperate Plea. Leo thought deeply about Su Yang's offer, as unlike Ver, he was not fixated solely on the surface-level facts being presented, but instead on the deeper implications behind those words and how committing to such a war might alter the cult's future in ways that could not be undone. If the Sioux clan were already preparing to abandon 74 of the 78 planets under their dominion, then relinquishing 2 of them was hardly a meaningful concession, for the cult could simply seize them once the clan's withdrawal was complete, whether they handed them over willingly or not. The true worth of this proposal did not lie in territory, but in the possibility, however fragile, of forging an alignment between the Sioux clan and the cult, for together they could muster a resistance against the universal government far greater than what either side could achieve in isolation. Yet Leo did not entertain the naive illusion that such an alliance could be conjured with a handshake and a few well-chosen words, for centuries of blood and bitterness could not be erased within a span of weeks, and whatever Su Yong believed, genuine trust between the 2 sides would be a process measured not in months but in generations. He knew well that the common people of the cult despised the Sioux clan as deeply as the Sioux clan's soldiers reviled the cult, each praying for the other's ruin, and convincing them to regard one another as allies would be neither simple nor swift. Even if, by decree, the banners of the Sioux clan and the cult were made to fly side by side, Leo understood that on the battlefield their soldiers were more likely to turn their blades against each other than the enemy, and so the viability of such an alliance was something he could only ever weigh with caution, and accept with a pinch of salt. So just to be clear, is this alliance between the Sioux clan and the cult wanted by everyone? Have your branch clan leaders and planetary commanders accepted this arrangement? Leo asked, as his question immediately made Su Yong wince. This was precisely the information he wanted to conceal in this deal till the end. However, now that Leo asked about it, he had no option but to reveal the truth about it. Su Yang's lips pressed thin as his golden eyes shifted away, and for a brief moment he looked almost reluctant to speak, yet when he did, the truth slipped out all the same. So far, the arrangement is only known by Patriarch Su Tang and myself, he admitted, his voice low but steady. The rest of the clan is not yet aware of it. He paused just long enough to draw in a breath, then lifted his chin again with stubborn resolve. But they will come around. Once they see the merit in this plan, once they understand that the Sioux clan's survival depends on forging a path forward with you, they will accept it. I mean, they will have no choice but to accept it. Leo shook his head slowly, the disappointment clear in his eyes, his expression hardening as his arms folded across his chest. That, he said, his voice measured and sharp, is exactly what I was afraid of. For in his mind, secrecy of this scale was not a sign of careful planning, but of dangerous division, and an alliance born out of silence and hidden promises was not the kind that could be trusted to stand when the universe decided to press down on it. Leo, listen to me, Su Yang said quickly, his voice tightening as if the weight of the chains binding his wrists was nothing compared to the weight pressing on his chest. I know how it sounds. I know it looks reckless, but it is not. My father understands, I understand, and that is enough for now. The rest of them, they will see reason once they realize what is at stake. When the other clans descend upon us, when they see the fire closing in, they will follow the only road left open to them. His words spilled faster, tinged with urgency, as his golden eyes locked onto Leo's gray ones without wavering. You think I don't know how stubborn they are? You think I don't know how much hate still festers in their hearts? Of course I do. But hatred will not feed their armies, nor will pride defend their worlds. When survival is on the line, even the most arrogant commander bends, and the Su clan will bend too. He leaned forward as far as the chains allowed, his voice dropping lower, almost pleading now. It will work out, Leo. It has to. There's no other way for us to stand against what's coming. This alliance is not a gamble, it's a necessity, and sooner or later the rest of the clan will realize that. The silence stretched for a heartbeat, heavy with the clash of conviction and doubt, before Su Yang finally let out a bitter laugh, his voice fraying at the edges. Truth is, I have nowhere else to turn to. If the cult refuses us, then the Su clan will fall. I don't think we can hold off the combined might of 5 clans alone. The Su clan, and myself, will be wiped out. Leo remained silent, his eyes fixed on Su Yang, though his mind churned like a storm beneath the surface. He had heard countless pleas for aid before, but this one struck differently, not because of the promise of planets or the bait of alliance, but because of the raw honesty buried in Su Yang's final words. I have nowhere else to turn to. That was not the voice of a politician bargaining for advantage, it was the voice of a man cornered, stripped of every option, clinging to the last shred of hope he could find. And though Leo did not yet trust the plan, nor the merit of an alliance that lacked the blessing of the Su clan itself, he could not help but feel the weight of his friend's desperation settle heavy on his chest, pressing him toward decisions he had never wished to make. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.